Okay, so thank you so much everyone for joining us here today for our final day of Worldings, a virtual conference presented by Griffin Art Projects and Urban Shaman. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Griffin Art Projects is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Musqueam, and Stolo nations, and we are honored and grateful to undertake our work here. My name is Jazz Keeler, and I'm the Contract Virtual Programs Curator with Griffin Art Projects. And I have just a few very quick housekeeping notes before we jump right into today's presentation. So first, I wanted to mention that if you would like to see live captions displayed for today's presentation, you can enable this by selecting CC Live Transcription at the bottom of your screen. And I always just mention that the captions aren't super accurate when it comes to names, so place names or people names, but we do hope that it is helpful in capturing most of what we are saying today. Lastly, I wanted to mention that if you are experiencing any technical issues at all with the Zoom interface today, we are also live streaming today's event on Griffin's Facebook page. And so I will just go ahead and paste the link in the chat, and you'll be able to catch all of today's events live on Facebook as well. My final note is just that we are using Zoom's webinar format today, and that just means that we cannot see or hear audience members, but we do invite you to get in touch with us and each other using the chat dialog box at the bottom of the screen. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear where you're joining from today, so feel free to say hello in the chat. So this morning, we are so honored and grateful to once again introduce you to Elder and Knowledge Keeper Carolyn Moore, who will be once again welcoming us today. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for your generosity throughout the virtual conference. And I'll pass it over to you.
Oh, Miigwech, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Carolyn Moore. I walk with two spirit names, Blue Sky Woman, Morning Star, and I'm from the Deer Clan. And I introduce myself to others and creators Oshawashko Gishko Kwe Wabanu Nung Vishnakos Wawashkashi Dudam. I'm a very honored member of Sagging First Nations, that's in Territory 1, Treaty Land 1. And but I'm also Red River half-breed. And I wanted to explain about the Red River half-breed. We were a nation. We had a flag. We were Anglican. The Métis were Catholic. We had a language. It was Bungi, and we had land. We had everything it was to be a nation. And just with the stroke of a pen, as early as the 60s, they decided to combine us and make us all Métis. My beautiful deceased teacher, she was Red River half-breed, and she never wanted to ever say that she was Métis, because we're not. We're half-breed. And the word half-breed is a word that can be used negatively, but I say it with pride. So any word that can be said with pride is still a good word. It's others that make that word ugly. But I'm always going to admit that I'm a half breed. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about the medicine wheel, and one of my very first teachings was the four colors of man. And in 2016, Mayor Bowman asked me, how could we, for the gardens, how can we use that gardens for reconciliation? And so what I suggested was the first time we had the four pots, giant pots in front of City Hall, and we had four little medicine wheels in there with the four main medicines. And on the ground, he says, what do we do with the flowers? And that's when I suggested to him that we do the four colors of man. So to the east is the yellow flowers, to the south is the red flowers, to the west is the black flowers, and to the north is the white flowers. And in the center, I suggested that they put purple flowers in the center, because that's what the medicine wheel is. It's the four colors of man coming together with creator. And that's how we've been doing the gardens now since 2016. And I couldn't think of any better reconciliation than the four colors of man coming together. And I'm seeing that more and more now as I'm getting older. And so the very first teaching I had is our ancestors, the old ones, they knew long ago that this was going to be a land of many colors. And I was taught to respect all four colors. I was taught to respect the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they pray, and especially to respect their elders. And I've been walking that way for the last 25 years. And for me, it's so important that we all come together. That's my teachings. I teach love and respect. And it just warms my heart to see it coming true more and more each day. So I'll do a smudge, and we call it a dry smudge. I have my bowl burning for the for not for the one that the smoke is coming. I think it's actually coming out down. I talked a little too much, and but to do this virtually, to start off in a good way, uh, we had to adapt because of the pandemic, and also because some modern buildings, they have central air and they can't open windows, and so they don't allow us to smudge a lit smudge. So I have a little ball of sage here, and I'm rolling it around in my hand, and I'm keeping it in as a little ball. So I want you to imagine that the smoke going around your head, around your whole being, and that's to get rid of the negativity around you. And then I want you to think of your mind so you could think good thoughts. Your eyes so you can see with kindness. Your ears so you can always hear things in a good way. Our mouths, the most deadliest weapon in the world. We want to make sure that we speak with kindness. Our hearts, because everything comes and goes from the heart. And then our whole being, and that's to allow us to know that we're not better than anyone else. And that's our smudges. And so when I greet someone, and if I smudge today, you know it's with sincerity because I did it with kindness. I also do my glasses so that, because we see out of them, so we want to make sure that we see with that kindness. I'll say a prayer, and then we can get started on this wonderful, exciting day. I'm very sad that this is the last day, but you know, all good things, uh, they don't come to an end. They just put on hold till the following year, I hope. So uh, I'll just try to start us off as best as I can. Creator, it's so shaushko gishko kwe wabanu nung dishna kasva washkashi dudam. Oh, Creator, our day is just starting, and I again call in our loved ones and our helping spirits that's gone on before us. Walk with us, Creator, today. Help us to see each other with that kindness in our eyes and listen in a good way. And walk with us always, Creator, and keep our journey safe. Oho miigwech, all my relations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. We're just so grateful for your wisdom and knowledge sharing throughout the virtual conference and for your presence. So thank you so much, Carolyn. So we'll now hear from Griffin Art Project's director, Lisa Baldissera, and Urban Shamans director, Dana Warren, for opening remarks. And so it's my pleasure to introduce both Lisa and Dana. So I will invite Dana and Lisa to join me. So Dr. Lisa Baldissera has worked as an independent curator, consultant, and writer, and in curatorial roles in public art galleries in Western Canada since 1999, including senior curator at Contemporary Calgary and chief curator at the Mendel Art Gallery in Saskatoon. She was curator of contemporary art at the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria from 1999 to 2009, where she produced more than 50 exhibitions of local, Canadian, and international artists. She holds MFAs in creative writing from UBC and in art from the University of Saskatchewan, and recently completed a PhD at Goldsmiths College, University of London. And Dana Warren is from the Agamic or Cree Nation in Muskwachees or Bear Hills, Alberta. She was awarded 2 Canada Council's Aboriginal curatorial residencies, the first to work with Grunt Gallery in Vancouver, BC from 2000 to 2001, and a second residency at the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, Ontario from 2010 to 2011. She has a BFA from the Emily Carr University of Art and Design and an MA from UBC. Warren was awarded the 2015 Emily Award from the Emily Carr University and was selected as one of 6 Indigenous women curators as part of the Canada Council for the Arts delegation to participate in the International First Nations Curators Exchange that took place in Australia in 2015, in New Zealand in 2016, and in Canada in 2017. And her most recent accomplishment was winning the Nitition Foundation Award for Curatorial Excellence in 2018. And she is currently the Director of Urban Shaming Contemporary Aboriginal Art in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So over to you, Lisa and Dana.
Thank you so much, Jazz. So appreciate all your wonderful coordination this weekend. Miigwech, thank you, Elder Carolyn Moore, for your welcome, and with gratitude for your inspiring words in your ceremony, which has really just set the openness and sharing for the entire weekend. And we thank you so much for your generosity in being here. I'd also like to acknowledge that Griffin Art Projects is an uninvited guest on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Musqueam, and Stolo nations. And I'm honored to work here as a settler alongside the nations who live, work, and create here as stewards of this land. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 3rd day of the Worldings conference, along with Dana, and just with gratitude for all the panelists who've shared their work this weekend and who will share their work with us today. It's just been an incredible 2 days, and I know today will just add to that. We're really grateful, very grateful for our wonderful conference partner, Urban Shaman, and to Dana for their collaboration, the presentation of Worldings. Thank you, Dana. And we opened the conference on Friday with 2 very moving and inspiring panels coordinated by Dr. Andrea Walsh from Victoria and Usha Sijaram in Johannesburg, Indigenous Public Art, Places, Histories, and Truths on Placemaking and Placekeeping, History and Truth-Telling, and History and Truth-Making, and the panel The Color Black on Blackness as a Color, as an Aesthetic and Multifaceted Identity. Both sessions were recorded if you missed them, and they will be available after the conference concludes. As well, yesterday, the panel The Collapse, Creative Liberation of Collective Making, moderated by Paula Opala and Bronwyn Lace of the Center for the Less Good Idea, which sought to explore collapse, the generative disintegration of first ideas in the process of making, and its movement toward ideas that follow. This also was accompanied by the screening of 3 films, which will be part of the recordings that we distribute later. The second panel, The Rhythm of Homing, yesterday was moderated by David Carnot, Imagined Alternative Presents and Futures in which conciliation is a perpetual negotiation and reconciliation is the restoration of good relations, and troubles the colonial-centric practice of decolonization. And there is also information available with Diane Roberts' website that will accompany that as well when the recording is available. Today we present the panel The Bag Factory, 30 Years of Collective Imagination, which is moderated by Candice Ellison from the Bag Factory in Johannesburg. The Bag Factory was founded in 1991 in the midst of a fractured political climate, shifting urban environment and social reimagining, and was established as a professional and non-hierarchical artist studio space for artists from different racial, education, and economic backgrounds. This discussion will explore the early vision and ethos of the artists who founded the Bag Factory and its resilient position in the urban context of Johannesburg, as well as an overview of current projects and initiatives. We will follow the panel with a spotlight feature presentation with Athi Patra Ruga of the South Africa-based organization Victory of the Word. Our second panel, Mide-wigwas, Birchbark Scrolls, is moderated by Dana and will address the contemporary art and archival project, Mide-wigwas Transmediating. This multimedia art exhibition by Angelina Mcleod explores how Anishinaabe peoples are reclaiming history, cultural protocols, knowledge, practices, language, and ceremony. And a virtual gallery exhibition will be available soon, and we hope the gallery itself will be able to open soon after the restrictions for COVID are lifted. And over to you, Dana.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I just want to thank Lisa and Jazz once again. They've put so much hard work into this symposium. For me, it's been pretty effortless to be a partner on this project, but I'm sure there's been a lot of behind the scenes work that nobody has seen, and they've done a lot of probably sleepless nights. I also just want to thank our elder, Carolyn Moore. Carolyn had come to us through a project that we had done several years ago. I think it was probably back in 2014 or 2015. And we have constantly, and she has so graciously given her time and energy to each project that we do. She's very open-minded about all these crazy art projects we throw at her. And yeah, we always pass tobacco to her beforehand, or usually beforehand, as well as try to shower her with gifts and money as well. So just for those of people who maybe don't really know how to work with elders on projects, there are some that are very great to work with and then aren't so traditional, but I love the stories and the knowledge sharing that she always does with us on each project. So thank you so much, Carol. We really appreciate all the time and energy you've given to the conference. For some of the other acknowledgements, we'd like to gratefully acknowledge our collaborative supporters for their generous promotional support and endorsement of the Worldings virtual conference. Bag Factory International Residency and Exhibition Space is a nonprofit contemporary visual art organization in Newton, Johannesburg that provides studio space to a cross-generational community of Johannesburg-based artists, as well as regular exhibitions that showcase new work by emerging artists to the wider public. The Center for Less Good Idea, which I still super love that title, is an interdisciplinary hub for experimentation and support, which creates and supports experimental, collaborative, and cross-disciplinary arts projects. Founded by William Kentridge to support those less good ideas, coined to address the first ideas cracks, arguing that in the act of playing with an idea, you can recognize those things you didn't know in advance, but knew somewhere inside of you. The Faculty of Media, Art, and Performance at the University of Regina, Ray Stason, Dean, and David Garneau, Professor of Visual Arts and MAP, who will also hold a panel entitled, didn't quite finish our sentence. Their panel was yesterday, I'm pretty sure. Once again, the panels have been organized to begin at a time when both Canadian and South African presenters and audience can join in on both sides of the world. This morning's South African panel has been pre-recorded to account for challenges in the winter power grid in Johannesburg. We invite the audience to stay on to join in the conversation at the end of the panels today. Each panel is 1 hour and 15 minutes long, followed by a short break and a discussion at the end. Thanks to our funders, the Winnipeg Arts Council, the Manitoba Arts Council, North Vancouver Recreation and Culture, the Griffin Foundation, Canada Council for the Arts, and Canadian Heritage. Thank you again for being with us today, and we look forward to another exciting day of presentations.
Thanks so much, Dana and Lisa. And we will jump right into our first panel of the day. So as Dana mentioned, the Bag Factory 30 Years of Collective Imagination has been pre-recorded, and I'll bring up the recording in just a moment. But first, I'd like to begin by introducing the panel's moderator, Candice Ellison. And Candice is here with us today. If you'd like to say hello, Candice, I'll just spotlight you beside me as I introduce you. Hi, Candice. So
Hi, good
Candace,
evening.
yep. Good evening. Yes, I always forget such a huge
Good
time
morning
difference.
to you.
It is quite late for our South African partners and audience members. So Candace Allison is a curator and researcher based in Johannesburg, where she is currently director of the Bag Factory. Prior to this, she held the position of curator at the New Church Museum in Cape Town. She worked at Kingston University London as curator and project manager, and she was part of the team that delivered the inaugural Zimbabwe Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2011. Independent curatorial projects include Kudanai Chure's solo exhibitions We Need New Names at the National Gallery of Zimbabwe in 2017 and Madness and Civilization at the Goodman Gallery in Cape Town in 2018 and at the Kalmar Kunstmuseum in Sweden in 2018, as well as the Södertälje Konsthall in Stockholm in 2019. Candace curated Material Gains in 2018 at Stellenbosch University Museum and Dear History, It's Not Me, It's You in 2017 at Bode Projects in Hamburg. Allison is a PhD candidate in the history department at the University of the Western Cape, where she is researching curatorial and museum ethics and post-apartheid South Africa. She holds an MA in curating from Kingston University London and a BA in honors in visual studies from the University of Pretoria. So thank you so much, Candace, for everything, for all your collaborative efforts in the virtual conference, as well as for organizing and moderating this lovely conversation, which we'll share just shortly. Thanks, Candace.
So thank you everyone for joining us. I am Candice Ellison. I'm the director at the Bag Factory in Johannesburg. This year we are celebrating our 30th anniversary as an artist studio and residency space. We have a gallery for exhibitions, and we also have been supporting artist and curatorial development in South Africa for 3 decades. And we're joined by Kagiso Patrick Malkloa, Tembinkosi Goniwe, and Fadzai Muchemwa. And I will give a brief introduction of each person, and then they will each speak for 10 minutes on the theme of the topic, which is 30 years of collective imagination. So we'll start with Pat, who studied at Rorke's Art Centre in KwaZulu-Natal and at the Morfolo Art Centre in Soweto. He was instrumental and participated in Tupelo and Triangle workshops. He's held numerous solo and group exhibitions and has worked in a number of important public collections across South Africa. Pat has been a studio artist at the Bag Factory for 29 years and has served on the board from 2008 to present. And in my 3 years as director of the Bag Factory, I can attest to the fact that Pat is the institutional memory of the organization. Tembinkosi Goniwe is an artist and art historian who is lectured at the University of Cape Town, University of the Witwatersrand, University of Fort Hare and Vaal University of Technology. He is currently a visiting researcher, if I understand correctly, or senior lecturer at Rhodes University. Tembinkosi was also an artist in residence at the Bag Factory in 2001, and he has gone on to become an academic and a curator since then. Notably, he curated the exhibition A Resilient Visionary, Poetic Expressions of David Kolowani, which showed at Iziko South African National Gallery in Cape Town and Standard Bank Gallery in Johannesburg in 2019. And then Fadzai, Veronica Muchemwa, is a researcher, writer, and curator from Harare in Zimbabwe. She is currently a master's researcher in the Arts of Africa and Global South's research program in the Fine Art Department at Rhodes University. Before this, she was a curator for education and public programming at the National Gallery of Zimbabwe from 2017 to 2020. And she was a curator in residence at the Bag Factory in 2019. So I've done enough talking for now. I'm going to hand over to Pat, who's going to speak about the early history and the ethos behind the creation of the Bag Factory.
Yeah, if I were to start, well, should I say my name? I'm Kagiso Pet Mautwa. I've been with the Bag Factory since it started, but I would start with the precursor to the space itself. We started off in 1985 with Bill Ensley, Bongi, Enthusiast, Sotriadis, Simon Tlangetwa, K. Hassan, an artist from Cape Town, Garth Erasmus, sure, I should have had a list to remember them all. But it was a group of artists from all over the country. Some were from Durban, I remember, like Hamilton Budaza, and I can't remember everyone offhand. But anyway, the idea was to have workshops and be able to work with artists within the country and outside the country. And the mission was to have workshops every year, which was 2 weeks in a year, normally summertime, I think September, October or so. And we would go out to a country space. Most of the time it was in Broederstroom, and we would actually book a space, a conference center, because it had an accommodation for both for artists, and then they had catering facilities, and they've got like a very big space where artists can work freely from. The idea behind that was to get the artists to break from the actually some form of imprisonment, in the sense that people were working in doing smaller works, A3, A4, A0, A5 and all that. And many of the artists had never worked in a bigger scale. And then some were just newly introduced to working with acrylics and all that, diversity of media. And those who wanted to do sculpture could do sculpture. I think the workshops carried on till 1990, which in 1989, we had problems with funding, but we said from the onset, we are going to function as a collective, and whatever we do, we'll try to get artists and assemble artists and get the workshop to carry on. So on the last year of before we came to the Bag Factory or started getting a space as the Bag Factory, we just raised funds for people to be transported to Johannesburg. And we said accommodation is not going to be a problem. We will house the people ourselves in our homes and all that. And some were sleeping by me, some were sleeping at Enthusiast, and we spread people far and wide within Johannesburg, wherever or whoever could give accommodation to to any of the artists. And it became a very successful workshop. We didn't have art materials to work with. Anyone had to come with whatever he could make art with. Unfortunately, Museum Africa was still being developed into a museum. So we spoke to one of the people in the municipality to can use Museum Africa as a shell, and they agreed, and then we had the space. So we could only drive to there, shorter distance and go there every day and all of that. And what I like, and you're talking about the ethos and the mission. The idea also was that if you are an artist, you are an artist, irrespective of whether you have material or not have material. What matters is the brain, the creative brain always will function in the absence of all the luxuries of any paintings and all that. If the mission is to create art, you'll always create art. You'll always find reasons to create art. You'll always find things that you can make art from. I think maybe that is why I'm still using part of the scraps for making art, because I think that has become sort of my kind of heredity in the art, and I quite enjoy it because it doesn't stifle me into one mode of functionality. It embraces all what I find within the township, within the town, and my everyday quotidian life. I am able to get anything that I can work with. Anyway, it's not about me, it's about the project itself. And after 1990, in 1991, I think Robert Loader managed to get some funding for space, and then he spoke to Ricky Bennett, and the Bag Factory space was founded. First, it was more near to the Market Theatre, but they thought that was more expensive, and the space that we got now, became the cheapest space that he could afford. And he built it out, and then they prepared the space, and then we moved in. That was in 1991. When we got in here, I mean, there was sort of a skeleton kind of structure of artists. One could count them on one or two hands. But many of the artists who were here, I can count people like Joachim Schoenfeld, Keasan was in the same Tlangetwa, myself, David Kolowani, Penny Siopis, Debbie Bell, and later the likes of Wayne Barker, Hedestins, Baron de Vet came for a short while, and other people that I've forgotten to mention. But as time went on, the space sort of got filled, and we have more artists to a point that we only had a part-time administrator, and Sandy Burnett was the administrator, albeit part-time. And then later, Gula Zinesteris came in as a director, but she was just part-time. And then while she was here, I think they sought the employer of, if I'm not mistaken, it became like Les Corn, who came in and became the administrator. And subsequent to that, there's been like sort of the need for the office to have staff which is functioning every day. Hello.
Yes, Brapat, we can still hear you.
You can still hear me.
Yes, go on.
And then we've had stuff, but sort of I'm skipping too much into the present period. But the idea started from the initial idea of always wanting to work together with artists, with artists from other places. And then because the precursor to the workshop idea was not only to get artists to work freely and all that, but it was to make the world smaller. And because the country itself had been in isolation for such a long time, to a point that when we started, one didn't know of any artists from Zimbabwe or Mozambique or Namibia or Botswana and all that. But the start of this place sort of helped to introduce us to artists from the peripheral countries, and later to the other parts of the continent. But within that, we had been able to reach out people from other parts of the world. Ironically, it was like one was able to move and visit overseas countries before one could go to any of these, countries around us on an art mission. For me, it was quite a very strange phenomenon. And I mean, most of itself is in art. It has helped the world connect with people from all different spaces of the world, for the fact that we have had interaction with artists from virtually the 4 cardinal points of the globe. And the artists from here and around South Africa have been able to visit, those other places of the world from exchange, as we have an exchange program which has been going on. And the idea has been to invite artists here, and then they interact with artists from here, and then they form a friendship and they invite each other, and then they see opportunities from whichever part of the world they can be on study, be on just on admission, or on residency, or collaborations, be it biennales, and all that. So it became sort of a way of making artistic practice fluid. So
Thank you, Pat.
what more was it? Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope I didn't speak too much. Okay.
Fatsai, you were curator in residence in 2019, and you also came from Zimbabwe, so you definitely filled the cultural exchange that Pat was talking about.
Yes, I did. Okay, so hello, I'm Fadzai, and I'm currently a member of the Arts of Africa and Global South Research Program at Rhodes University. I'm the recipient, along with Liz Kobusinge from Uganda, of the first Art Connection Africa residency at the Back Factory Artist Studios. So I think collaboration process, exploring new ideas and expanding the boundaries of practice with an emphasis on the creative process are essential in building a collective imagination. So the final art object is just a bonus. So my presentation is somewhat convoluted and meanders a bit, so bear with me. You get it eventually. So my story with the bag factory is about how collaboration with one person often leads to further collaborations with other people or with other spaces. And my experience of the bag factory is slightly different from that of Brapat or Bratebingosi, because I did not know Johannesburg, and I still don't, or the bag factory as they do. And my history with the bag factory is both personal and collective. So I came to the bag factory artist studios in 2019. But I felt like I've been making my way there for a long time in some ways. The art community in Zimbabwe talks fondly of the Pachipama workshops, similar to the Tupelo workshops, which led to the founding of Bag Factory as the impetus for experimental work. And I've always wondered what it would feel like to be part of such a community. So to the meandering. In 2017, I attended the British Museum's International Training Program. And whilst I was there, I met with Chris Spring, who was then a curator in the Department of Africa, Oceania, and Americas. And on the death of Robert Loader, which happened when I was there, we spoke at length about the Triangle Network and its impact. Then, of course, for me, the bag factory was an idea. It was a space specific to Johannesburg that I hope to visit one day. I didn't know then that it would just take me 2 short years to get there. I got the news that I'd been accepted for the residency just before David Kolowani passed away. Oh, no. It wasn't, but he did pass away 2 months before I came to the bag factory. So I was sad. So part of my dream of visiting the bag factory was also getting to meet David Kolowani because I was fascinated by his writing and his artwork. And I was sad that I never got to meet him. But I got to know of his vision and his work ethic through chats with Brapat. I used to spend quite a lot of time with Brapat. Besides interviewing him for my project there, would just randomly just chat. And I also viewed the exhibitions of his work curated by Tembingosi at Standard Bank and at the Wits Art Museum. When I arrived in Joburg, I had a plan because Joburg has a particular history with Zimbabwe, with most Zimbabwean families. And I wanted to explore what the city really is about. I've been in residencies or fellowship programs, with a set schedule, and you know what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. So kind of like working on my own threw me for like a minute. And I was to be in charge of my own time. I was so shocked. It was scary and exhilarating at the same time. But what I found gratifying is, besides Candice and Tina making me feel welcome, artists opened their studios and in some cases their homes to make space, to make me feel welcome, to make me feel at home. And in that process, I got to meet other artists and other creatives who are not directly part of the Bag Factory family. And I remember Tina organizing for us the first weekend when things calmed down, because we got to Joburg at the time of the protest, organized for us, a little schedule about what was happening in Joburg. And we ended up at an exhibition where we had no idea what we were about. But being at the Bag Factory kind of like made me feel like it was okay to explore. It was okay to just venture out and meet whatever. And Candice took me to my first live art auction at Strauss & Co. I'd never anticipated what it meant to run a secondary art market. And I got to do that. I also found myself attending a mini conference at Wits University on art objects and archives. And I met Laura DeHad. So when I met her, she probably doesn't remember meeting me either, but her work made an impression. And I have included the work that I came across during that meeting for an exhibition that I just curated this year. So because of the circumstances surrounding my arrival, it became clear that my plans had to change. And I feel like that is what Bag Factory is about, that you can make a plan, but if that plan doesn't work, we can always make another plan. I spent the first month getting the feel of the city, talking to Bradpat, always interviewing artists and spending time at the Fitz Library and the Historical Papers Research Archive. And then when I eventually had an idea of what I wanted to do, we sent out a call, got some very interesting submissions. I plan to do 1 day of physical workshopping and then work remotely with the writers. Of course, I was being very romantic about what it means to work on a publication. And Candice pointed out that it might be wise to do 3 days instead and work on those actual texts so that by the time the workshop ended, would have reasonably workable drafts. So the result was I got to spend time in Studio 17 with Duduzile Matebula, whom I would never have met otherwise, with Helena Wambembe, with Molemo Moiloa, with Olivia Bota, and with Dineke, without whom I could never have managed to pull off the project. So I tried to frantically pull everything together in a month to ensure the launch happened before the end of my residency. People like Tinashe Mshakavanwi, who helped with the proofing of the text, and Pumlani Ntuli, who worked on the layout, and Tina and Candice and Lindo. It was a whole family thing. It was really a family affair. Eventually the project happened and it was launched before I left. So working on this project helped to ground my practice further and refine my interest. So I already had an interest in working collaboratively. I'd worked on co-curating projects with, for example, Tandazani Lakama and Lillian Chaonwa. But these were kind of like happy coincidences. This now further grounded me in what I really should focus on. Towards the end of my residency, Candice and I formed a curatorial collective, practice theory collective, and much of what we are interested in as a collective is grounded on the ethos of the Bag Factory. And we presented the first iteration of our project, the Apothecary for the Post-Colonial Condition, at the ACASA Triennial Conference last month. We work, of course, and experiment, but the collective is also a community to hold each other up and provide support. My residency at the Bag ended with a conversation with Helena Molemo, Liz, and Sanele, titled The Violence of an Anxious Mind. And it was kind of like a prophetic, really. And who knew that the conversation that we had that day would be our reality just 4 months later. and we have been in a state of anxiety since then. And when I got back to the National Gallery, the first conversation I had was with Dineo Sekwete, who was in residency at Njelele Art Station. And the next one was with Masimba within a week, Masimba Wati on his exhibition, Sokunge. So what these talks did was remind me of the many conversations about life, about art, about random things that we had during lunch or just walking to Newton Junction. And also, I felt like besides the grounding that I had got from my residency, these were my first tentative steps towards exploring audacious art practices. So beyond my time at the Bag Factory, I worked on the Notes for Tomorrow exhibition organized by Independent Curators International. Why I mentioned this exhibition specifically is because it's a collaborative project. There are lots of curators, and I found joy in being part of a collaborative project and the fascinating experience of different views and working on an exhibition virtually. Before, I probably wouldn't have dreamt of working on an exhibition remotely, but I feel my time at the Bag gave me the courage to explore other things. And this year, I on a research grant from the ITP, remember 2017, I carried research on Helena Wambemba's practice. I'm still in the process of writing up my research report, but I've seen how my research has unfolded as a collaborative process and a negotiation, kind of like intimacy as a method of writing and collaboration. So writing alongside Helena has indeed been an experience. And I got to spend time in a home and studio in Pretoria. And on my visit with Helena, I met with Motsane, a fellow ITP. And then we had lunch in Pretoria with Tila and Tsepoho, I might have said that wrong, who were in residency at the Bag Factory at the time. And it was fascinating for me to see three networks actually converge. And then Dineke, with whom I worked on the Curating Johannesburg project, invited me to work on the virtual gallery of the Kakanka 2021 exhibition on In Motion. The exhibition Feel is another collaborative project that I enjoyed working on. Perhaps the most important about the part I curated is the feeling of meeting, which being part of a group is what I miss most about the Bag Factory. So with no judgment, no pressure, but there's always someone to catch you when you fall. And I know I've made the Bag Factory sounds like a utopia. It isn't. There are bound to be conflicts. My stay overlapped with that of Marco Ishizuka, who during residency ran a workshop. And part of the workshop was two people making the Japanese symbol for a human like this. I don't know if you can see me. I found it interesting that I was unwilling to try because where I come from, sometimes failing means being laughed at. But everyone kept encouraging me, even though I did fail, I didn't feel too bad. And I feel like it prepared me for getting up even when things don't work out the way we want. And I think the individual and the group are committed to each other. and each is translatable in the other. And although the individual carries within themselves thoughts, feelings, and experiences, they also carry those of others. And once you've been at the Bag Factory, the ethos and the imagination of the place never leave you. Thank you. I know I talked a lot. I apologize.
Thanks, Fadzai. Thank you. That was great. Tim and Corsi, you are the last respondents.
Thank you, Candace, for the invite, and thank you to Bag Factory and the extended host of this wonderful conversation. I also want to appreciate Brapet, who's wonderful painted precursor of Bag Factory. I also want to appreciate Fadzai's beautiful, beautiful experience, the narrative about her involvement, but also what it means, you know, to be not only at Bag Factory, but also to bring things to Bag Factory. You know, I mean, what I want to do, because I think my job is already done by Brapet, because I've prepared to speak of what Bag Factory came about, and also to map out a few things into why Bag Factory is important. But the best way to start, because I don't have much time, I've mapped about 4 points, but a good way I think I will make sense and coherent given these days of this COVID is just to read a short narrative, and then I'll unpack some of those points. So let me start. So much could be discerned in and reflected on the 30 years of the Bag Factory's artist studios. Individuals who were very involved in and associated with the establishment and the evolution of Bag Factory have intimate insights and a wealth of historical details to teach us about the significance of the artist studios. As Brapet painted the historical precursor to Bag Factory. Without repeating that, but just to emphasize 2 points there, that the tupelo, which on which Bag Factory is built, you know, I mean, there are a number of things we can make, but there are just 2 points. One is the beginning of what has become international in South Africa, because tupelo brought what was never in place as far as international artists meeting in one space, working for that 2 years, you know, I mean, and that was not heard of in South Africa. Of course, they were visiting artists in to different places, institutions, but these were more enclosed within the university, so to speak. Whereas the Bag Factory, I'm sorry, the tupelo became this space where artists not only within South Africa, but also international. By international, we are referring not only artists from the West, we are also speaking of artists that came from other parts of the continent. So there are 2 things that are important in the first point, is this international that is both artists outside of the continent, but also artists from the continent. So that is a very important point. The second point also is that tupelo also began to set up or advance, you know, I mean, this idea of interracial links, working of people from different cultures and different races, geographies, and gender, and so forth. So in other words, it espoused what now has become easily for many people non-racialism that we have known about political movements such as ANC and 80s UDF. So in other words, it was timely in the 80s for tupelo to advance that within the space of art, because as Brapet said, when Bag Factory was set up, even with tupelo, it was not only Black artists, it was a mix of artists. It was not only men, it was also women artists. So that's very important, those 2 points. And this is what you get later with Bag Factory, the kind of artists that were hosted there. So they were like a mix of local artists, gender-wise, you know, also artists who were coming outside of South Africa, who also became, so in other words, that precursor becomes this space that becomes international. So that for me is very important about Berg Factory. Let me continue with my narrative. There are also those individuals who spend momentary time at Berg Factory as residents and visiting artists, administrators and brokers in different capacities, not to forget audiences and fans of the place. All these diverse individuals, some local and others internationals, have made Berg Factory dynamic, vibrant, wealthy, and thus a space to reckon with, to appreciate, to envy or despise, depending on the various relations and intimations that different people have had with the space and those who are involved in the space. Also remember, Berg Factory, like Tupelo, has encountered some of the very, very kind of worrying and troubling criticism, you know what I mean, because of reason that we don't have time here. So in other words, these kind of projects, they work against forces that were not happy. That's why I'm saying some were appreciating, some were despising and envious. Of course, if you read the history of Tupelo, you'll get, I'll just name two, like Gavin Young's criticism, Colin Richards' criticism of Tupelo, and you get these things again when Berg Factory set up similar individuals and others lashing on this space, precisely because this space is happening outside of these so-called established institutions such as the universities, where these individuals were located or were working. So what also becomes interesting for me with Berg Factory and Tupelo, I'll use these two problematic terms, the margins and the center. Berg Factory works within, from the margin, in order to open up the center. It questions the center. That's why people who work in these central spaces like universities, commercial galleries, they had to reckon with Berg Factory, Tupelo, whether they like it or not. So in other words, we see then that the periphery becomes a site of productivity, a site of not only resistance, but subversion, transgression, and the productivity that will set up a trend that was not there in South Africa. This also will take me to these other points I want to make. I'm watching my time, right? So that said, back again to my narrative. I'm one of those individuals who spend a momentary time as a visiting artist at the Berg Factory as a residency program in 2001. The 3 months I was there were eye-opening and enriching in many ways. And thank you to the administrators who organized logistics for my residency, and more so to the artists with whom I interacted. It was a kind of artistic and intellectual heaven, conversing with the likes of Brade, David Kolowani, the likes of Patrick Mautlwa, Patrick Mautlwa, the likes of Brasem, Sam Shengetwa, the likes of Brake, Kea San, and many others. Of course, my interactions and conversation were with many other artists within and outside Berg Factory as well, artists who affected my perceptions, knowledge, practice, in ways that effectively substantiated and matured my experience of both the art world and life in general. Berg Factory was a space from within and through which I learned, navigated, and experienced not only Fortsburg, a new town where Berg Factory is located, but also Joburg City and its extended and peripheral areas, as well as the institution around there, including its players and brokers. And this is what Fadzaya talks about, that while they're in Berg Factory, you start to meet other people. You start to go to events, to institutions. So your world expands. So this is like one of the beautiful things that Berg Factory offers as a space, because within that space, which is closed, you already have a pool of different people helping you think about your ideas, helping you to think about not only what you are working on, but also the artwork itself, projects to work with, but also helping you to link with other people. So in other words, Berg Factory becomes a fountain, but also it becomes a stepping stone as well as a springboard to learn about Joburg, to meet people in Joburg, to interact with other institutions. And this is one of the things, the greatest gift. So in other words, we have to think of Joburg as this artistic and intellectual garden, if you like, right? So let me continue with my narrative because I need to guard, because once I start to fear, I'm going to lose you guys. It was during my residency that I also gleaned into the profound meaning and significant contribution of the Berg Factory Artists Studios to both local and international community. It was, however, later I would learn more about Berg Factory as not only the first artist studio, but also a space that hosted international artists in South Africa, a point I've made. Before Berg Factory, there were no independent artist studio spaces where artists could work full-time and professionally as a community of individuals in South Africa. What was in place, rather, before Berg Factory was a practice of artists working in isolation in their own homes, or those who have the privilege working in art institutions where they were teaching. But most artists didn't have the luxury of just going to a space whereby you can process your thoughts, you can gather your data without disturbance, and then you can work from 9 to 5, even in the evening. So Berg Factory, it's the first space to provide that kind of possibility. So in other words, it's a pioneering space, so to speak. Right, where we were. Okay, so it is no exaggeration to say that Berg Factory is a pioneering institution for professionalizing the practice of artist studios and artist residencies and hosting of international artists in South Africa, something that also spilled across the continent later. Of course, that was already advanced by Tupelo in terms of setting up this studio or this kind of a workshop in other places. So those workshops also extended to this kind of events and activities, and also some of those artists were also participating at Berg Factory. So it what Prapet was talking about as a precursor, now it becomes more percolated, more kind of concentrated and systematized within Berg Factory. By systematizing, I don't mean rigidize, I make it rigid. One of the things in Berg Factory, it's always this fluidity. There's always this element of improvising, spontaneity, and so forth. It was Berg Factory that, in fact, introduced and hosted artists from different parts of Africa. From Africa, when Africa was a distant myth for many South Africans. Thank you to colonial apartheid for constructing and imposing national borders that have been instrumental in isolating South Africans from the rest of the continent. It is always amusing to observe the contemporary trends, a contemporary trend of South African institutions and brokers, so hyped today about working with and bringing to South Africa African artists from other parts of the continent. They will speak as if there's no history that have set that kind of practice. And this history is what I'm saying is the work of Berg Factory, the work of Tupelo. Right. So many of these institutions and these brokers tend to speak as if the traffic of African artists to South Africa is recent. And the attributes, whilst sometimes in their silent, but in between the lines, they tend to disregard the pioneering work of Berg Factory, you know, which for me is very, very troubling when we think of the visual culture and the historiography of South African artists. I made this kind of presentation thinking of how does Berg Factory fit not only in the historical developments of South Africa, but also what Candice have asked me to think about the future of Berg Factory. Because now we are speaking in a present that is propelled by this past, but also a present that asks us, how do we move? Of course, we'll speak about this relevancy and the future possibility of what Berg Factory can be. So I'm thinking about that. But what I've also done here is mainly to speak of Berg Factory as an institution or a site, a space. I should also mention that Berg Factory is not just a space that organizes itself. They are individuals, they are people. And these are the people that needs to be recognized. They need to be appreciated. Pat have listed them, for example, so I won't repeat. I just want to give a tribute to one person among which we all know, and especially Brade, who passed, because One of the things Brate has done over the years, working with Brapet, with Sam, with others, and in particular with the likes of Robert Loda and Bill Ensley and so forth, it was to create this possibility of a South Africa that people want. I'm talking about a South Africa that is diverse. Diversity not as in theory, as an ideal, but as a living experience. And this is what I think David's legacy should be thought of. And also as one of the pioneering figures in the making up or setting up of Tupelo as well as Back Factory, among other developments. I think it is always important to appreciate him. Equally to appreciate the likes of Brapet, to appreciate the likes of Sam and many others, including Ricky Barnett and those who are still alive. And I really encourage us to appreciate these figures while they are still alive, because there's a tendency in history, or in South Africa in particular, to appreciate Black contributors in art history and visual culture while they are born. While they are dead. While they are still alive, we just either suck from them, we always take from them, but we never appreciate them. We never, the fact that even Brapet, for example, hasn't had a substantiated retrospective, talks loud about these kind of things. And yet here is a living archive that has witnessed, that has been part of this development. So what I'm saying is, when we think of Back Factory, or when we are speaking about these 30 years of experience, we should also think about figures, about people. That's why earlier in my presentation, I keep on talking about individuals. These individuals are not abstract. They have names. Their gender. Brapet has mentioned, for example, the likes of Sisbongi, who are also involved in the pioneering work of Tupelo, even the starting of Back Factory, and being involved one way or another in the evolution of Back Factory. And there are also other figures that have also been supportive of Back Factory, whether at the level of admin, the likes of Mahati, for example, and many others. And these are figures that we tend not to appreciate when we talk about these institutions. The administrators who do the work of fundraising, of organizing the logistics, who see that these studios are clean, to also facilitate the travelings that some of us benefit to come to Back Factory. The likes of Fadzaya and many others who move from a different country to South Africa. That it's work. And who does the work are not the artists at Back Factory. It's mainly the administrators. So we need to look at this dynamic. So that's what I was saying. Back Factory is a dynamic institution made out of these different sectors or individuals. That said, again, I want to just thank the opportunity to share my short thoughts here.
Thank you, Tembi. You're making my job difficult. Because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I sent the panelists some topic points to consider, and you've covered all of them. So I'm actually just going to pick up on the last thing you spoke about. And that was one of the provocations to the panelists, is that the Bag Factory is described as an artist-run space. And I participated in a panel discussion a few weeks ago with two other similarly described artist-run spaces. And Kula, who was a previous administrator of the Bag Factory, challenged the idea that the Bag Factory is artist-run. And so this is a conversation that Timi Nkosi and I had a few days ago at length about what this means and how true this statement is. And just to talk a bit about the structure of the Bag Factory, which we haven't touched on. We've talked about the artists. Pat, you mentioned the administrators even in your introduction, which clearly gives an indication of how these two work together. But there's also a third part of the Bag Factory structure, which is the board of directors. And in the early days, this was made up of, as far as I understand, it was Robert Loder, it was David, and I think it was Sandra Burnett. But this has changed. We've had a board which was just artists, and now we have a board which is a combination of skilled professionals who are experienced in finance and business and governance, as well as Pat and Usha, who sit on the board representing the artists. So the question is an open-ended one. But to respond to this idea, is the Bag Factory an artist-run space? What does this mean? And to what extent is this statement true?
From my part, it's it's like you say, you've got the car, it's got an engine, but it's got the wheels. Or it's got the wheels, it's got an engine, doesn't have a steering. So because of I think the admin of the Bag Factory became more as we became more ambitious. And as time went on, because of the growing interest and the sort of a deluge of people coming in, we needed a full-time administrator who is going to be running that part. And also it was about seeing the project grow because of then the situation was easy. You'd invite just one artist from a connection in London, you'd come over, and then Sandy would facilitate the things, and then it gets introduced to us. And then we had a sleeping place which was next door to Sandy's house. So that became very easy. But as time went on, things sort of changed and expanded, and it needed sort of an individual who's hands-on. And because of the job being well done, then the project grows on its own. And because the things are being done, the interest, gets more, and people tend to trust and would like to associate with a space which is seen as a successful sort of space. Answering your question about, is it artist run, or I think it's a collective. It's a body with a heart. Without a heart, there's no body. There can be a body, but without a heart, there won't be any mobility. So it's like sort of trying to pull things apart, which just have to work together. For one, there should be the other. And for me, that's how I view it. And there's one point that we miss, which I think has become very common in talking about the history of the Bag Factory. Most of the credit has been given to, I would say, mainly David and Robert Loader, but without a base like the Art Foundation and Bill Ainsley, I think some of the things wouldn't have happened. And for the fact that the first workshop in Zimbabwe was the people who went there to start the Pachipamwe was Bill Ainsley, David Kolowani, and Helen Sibidi. And that's when they came back, Bill Ainsley got an accident. There were 3 in the car. And unfortunately, Bill died during that accident. That was in 1989. I remember I was in New York then. After getting the first residency, in the Triangle in New York, attending the first workshop in New York. And when I came back, it was about the sad news of Bill having died. What I'm trying to intone is that the name of Bill Ainsley shouldn't be forgotten, because he, in the absence of these structures, he had a kind of, here the Art Foundation, where many of the people started from, the likes of William Kentridge, Diane Hislop, and many other artists, the Colbert Machiles, some of the top artists started off there before the advent of the Bag Factory. And part of the idea of the Bag Factory being started was hatched from that space. That's where David used to take his lessons. That's where Ricky Bennett used to have his lessons. That's where William Kentridge used to have. I'm merely mentioning that because some of the things get forgotten. They say at times when glory comes, you forget the route that you traveled to the higher podium. But I would really like to mention the fact that Billingsley also played a major role in part of the nucleus foundation of the Bag Factory, together with Robert Loader, together with David Kolowani, and all that. But then, because of the division and divisiveness, for you to be able to facilitate things and make things happen, you had to have a white friend, in a space, and then who would help you to link up. Because you wouldn't say, Robert Loader, come to Soweto, It would have been impossible for him to get to Soweto and say, no, I want David Kolowani. David Kolowani had to be somewhere in town, in a place where he's trusted, then he can meet. That's where the dynamics of the country sort of, but now the whole thing was, how do we forge interaction in a clever way, And then in the end, it became like all coming together as one. Just out of that endeavor, it helped combine people in one space. And there we are, we talk about the Bag Factory, the workshops, and, that's just one point that I wanted us to note, because it gets very forgotten.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
And following on from that, I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on this. But so the Bag Factory's been running international artistic residencies, exchange programs, since 1996 officially. I believe there were artists who came before that as well. And in South Africa, it's still one of the few formal international residency spaces for artists. It's the only one for curators. And there are some other initiatives. Commercial galleries are bringing artists from the continent. Per Helvetia, Goethe, they've got small initiatives as well to bring artists from their countries. But do you think that artistic exchange programs like what the Bag Factory is doing, is it still relevant? Is it still necessary for South Africa? As you mentioned, we bring a lot of artists from the rest of the continent, as well as Europe and North America and other parts of the world. But what should this look like, international exchange going forward? And where should our focus be as an organization?
So I'll just jump in. I'm not sure what the future for spaces like the Bag Factory is like at the moment, because the world is going to change. I hesitate to say post-corona, but because I thought by now we'd be living in a different world. But anyway, so what the Bag Factory and spaces like it, like maybe Greatmore Studios, what the future looks like is impossible to tell right now. But for example, Brad had talked about how they used to do, artists used to do everything at the Bag Factory. But as the Bag Factory changed, it morphed into something else, and administrators came in. So I foresee the bag factory changing in the way it operates, possibly, but not quite sure how that's going to work out. It's a place for experimentation. I'm curious to see what that's going to look like.
I think the whole thing rests with the vision, and the vision. From the vision, there should be a mission, and really looking at what space in the bigger, what portion in the bigger space are we? Because now, as you have alluded, there's been, post the establishment of the bag factory, there's been like many other spaces sprouting around town. We may have been the first, and we led and they followed. So in a way, we have been visionaries in some way or the other. But if one doesn't reinvent himself, you become like a rock that has stayed there and gets covered by the grass, and it's never seen anymore. So I think maybe, if possible, there should be sometime, I don't know if it's possible, there should be a sit-in, and there's got to be a kind of rigorous debate regarding that vision. And I think if we sit and talk and interrogate the way, there's bound to be something that comes out. Because before, the thing was simple. We'd say, this is what is lacking. For instance, in many ways, there has been, for a long time in Johannesburg, and actually right through the country, post-graduating from the university, do you go back to your bedroom and make paintings and make installations? You need space where you can interact with other artists, like-minded, have debates, attend, shows, and meet other people. That opens up your whole world about art. And I think partly the Bag Factory has always provided that kind of space. That is why you find many young artists have started here and sprouted and became, a big or greater artist on his own way. So the start of the idea, it's still there. That's what we are known for. I think I would be overstating. I say it's sacrosanct. It's there. It's our genome. But how do we grow? Because it has become a race. We've got to keep on leading. So we can only lead if we sit and debate the things and help reshape the vision. Because now, if you look at many of these places, don't have a concrete board like we have. We have appointed boards. We've got a committee that sits and discusses, the applications and all that. We have a structure, and then we've got to now say, with this structure now, what do we bring in for us to can talk about, and that's how I kind of see it. Maybe I'm being idealistic, but that's how I think we can only build things by establishing goals for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a very complex question you're asking. Mm-hmm. And future is one of the challenging phenomena to deal with. So what I don't have answers, you know, I mean, let me just pick up on what Prapet just says. The idea of reinvention, this idea of revision. Perhaps one has to think of a kind of perpetual way of generating this vision that adjusts with time, which adjusts with certain demands of context, but a context that is not restricted to locality, but is also beyond local interest. Because now we are part of a global system, even if we are still in this part of the world. So one has to be looking at what developments are taking place in other parts of the world and see how Back Factory relates into those developments and start to then retune or work on this vision. One of those ways I'm thinking, you know, I mean, and COVID has brought it into our attention, the importance of the digital. So perhaps the question should be how Back Factory is rethinking itself in the present, a present that is already moving into a future as far as making use of the digital. Because now we are speaking via the digital. So digital is here, is going to be here with us for a long time, even if COVID subsides or we are given a relief. So in other words, if anything, this vision should take into account our uses of technology. You know, I mean, that's one area I'm thinking practically here of what this vision should look at. Of course, you know, I mean, as Candice was saying, we were chatting and a number of things came. And for example, to use Prapet's notion of there's a race, you know, I mean, even within the digital, there's a race to digitize archives. There's a race to conquer the digital space, you know, I mean, and it's worse in this country because the government have failed even to make the data affordable to locals, and yet we are moving into the digital. Even look at the challenges with elderlies who are not learned people as far as technology, and yet for them to register for vaccine, they need smartphone, they need, you know what I mean? So in other words, the thinking can be ahead, but the practicalities and the resources of and the infrastructure is not considered. So the idea of the digital has to be taken into account, but also has to think of realistic issues and resources and facilities. I prefer the word infrastructure is key, you know. While I believe in technology and all of that, but I also still hold on in certain kind of vintage issues. Because I remember, for example, when CDs came and now with this digital music, people said vinyl are dead, but look at vinyls are back now. You know, for some have become a kind of trend or a sense of sophistication of one kind. So while we are looking and also participating in the race for digital, I don't think certain things that have worked should be relinquished. There are things that, you know, I mean, in a way in which Back Factory has fashioned itself need to be kept, but rather to be, I don't like the word improve, to be modified, to be advanced, to be progressed, you know, to be propelled to move and why. That's one way of thinking, and that, as Prapet have said, it will require this kind of dialogue and these engagements. And also this engagement should not wait for these kind of conferences from Canada. Of course, thanks to Kentridge and the curators. You know, I mean, and we can't always speak about local issues via the international brokers. You know? So we have to begin to initiate these things on our ongoing basis. Perhaps That's part of one of the activities of keeping Back Factory alive and negotiating this idea of relevancy is to design a program of I'm not thinking of talk shops. You can talk until the next day, but to think of a discourse that is moving quickly to praxis, to think of discussion that also translate into activities. And Back Factory, in fact, is a good space for that, because artists, they do talk, they do research, but that manifests quickly into works of art, whether it's object, paintings, prints, performances, installation. Same thing as Fadzai was talking earlier about conceptualizing project that you curate. Curate is a form of physical activity that take ideas and realize them. So I'm thinking of that kind of discourse that is not going to be simply a talk show, but it's going to be designed in a way in which it has practical outcomes or pragmatic kind of activities that sooner are going to test these ideas in terms of this digital, in terms of these technologies. Yeah. That's one way of thinking of how, and the idea of relevancy, it also poses a pressure. And what the pressure does, it makes people panic. It subjects people to this rush. Some ideas can come quicker, but some, they take their time. And the gift of Back Factory as a studio for artists, because even those who are doing residence, you're not forced to produce a stunning, substantiated show. It's like a cooking space, like a lab to test ideas that you might pick up somewhere else. So in other words, we have to be careful with this idea of relevancy, that it doesn't force us try to have what you call it instant solutions to the kind of visions we want to put in place. So we need to always check and balance. That's why pace become important. How do we pace ourselves? Perhaps for me, that's why the idea of how to keep Back Factory alive and relevant. To keep Back Factory alive so that its oxygen, still offers others, The space itself enables possibilities like what I benefited, like what Fadzai was talking about, and a many range of other artists we can list, the Blessing Gobeni of today's, and the many others who went through Back Factory. So how Back Factory becomes a springboard, not only to sustain itself, it becomes a fountain only to sustain itself, but also a springboard that allows others to grow. Also inculcating an ethics that those who grow, they also give back one way or another. And that's how I think Back Factory is going to be kept alive, that the kind of project these advancing and established artists are doing, they should somehow be linked back to Back Factory. And the university has a good way of doing that. They use the word alumni, associate, and with especially with financial, with recession in economics, and alumni are called to come in. And some of the alumni, they've donated millions. That's why, especially with the kind of Ivy Leagues university or really established, you find individuals and families donating to this institution, whether in buildings, repairing program, labs, what you call libraries, scholarships, professorship, chair, and all of that. I think that's the vision that it should be rethink. And I think it won't be new, because as Candice was speaking, and I recall when I was in Cape Town a few years ago with the Triangle, different players they're discussing, and one of the things Lazio presented, it was how even guesswork is rethinking itself in terms of how to develop different programs and projects that keeps it alive instead of just only residency that use the space, but also they start to work with the city. They start to work with institutions. You know, individuals are here to build future projects. Curators are here researching and da. So I think that's the kind of thinking that I don't think Candice and those at Backfact, they need to labor on their own. They can create conditions and programmings that invites a range of contributors, you know, as similar like this, like Fadzai and many others, Tembin Kosis and others who have ideas in a series of conversation to begin to inform this vision.
I feel like you're taking the baton, Tembin Kosi. But definitely, it's definitely something that we've been thinking about. This the COVID lockdown. It's amazing how it gave, I guess, organizational space to just stop and think and reflect. As Pat says, some parts of the bag factory are sacrosanct. They are part of its identity. But how do we keep growing and serving the community that the bag factory does? Tembi, and you've definitely made some interesting suggestions and provocations that I really appreciate. So I think we have 10 minutes left. I don't want to hog the Q&A. Perhaps you have questions you want to ask one another, or any final thoughts that you'd like to share before we close the session.
Well, I think intoning on what Tembin Kosi was saying, what he's talking about has, I mean, some of the projects happened here in the bag factory. I remember there was that of a whole horde of architecture students who were coming from, I don't know, from Germany or whatever, but they were talking about mapping up the city, and then the bag factory was used as part of the venue for discourse and debate. And some, I think there was also a group that was sent by Guessworks, and I think the subject, if I may say, was to look at how this space can be changed. And they were taking maps and making models of how they would see if they were given the, you know, the chance to change both the geography and the topography of the bag factory, what they would do. I think those were some of the projects that are very good, which, well, you know, people, when they think creatively, their terms go far above our heads. But I think droplets of that from what they were doing can be picked up, and then we can see how we actually take part of it, and then as a seed, and see how we, you know, we ripple it
Some
together.
slides. I'm just watching right now.
I know, because I could be debate about it, or, you know, or maybe actually inviting, you know, people like Tembi or Fuzi, or, you know, other people to come and say, I think this place needs this topic. Let's get onto it and see what we can say, and look at it critically, because at times in most cases, we're looking at their successes and say, hallelujah, hallelujah, it's so nice and all that. But if without looking at the back and seeing, you know, you can actually plan forward when you see what you've left at the back, and you can say, now I'm pushing the distance and I'm seeing a bigger sort of a dream. And my way of building the dream is kind of galvanizing the ideas and people who've had the experience of being in the bag factory, as Tebikosi has said, of things like the alumni and all that, which of course we just have a chip of that, in the sense that some of the artists who have been here, they felt it's not duty bound, but in kind. They thought they should sponsor some younger artists and maybe sponsor a studio for, I mean, those people are not earning like lots of money, but they said, of what I make, because I felt in need, that space provided a space for me. So there are some who are as needy as I was. Let me try and throw back, even if it's small, you know. So those kind of things, it's some of the things that we should try to maybe encourage and see how far we can, you know, go with that. So,
Okay, so I have a question. Candace, you asked us about whether artistic exchange programs are still relevant. I would say they are, because I benefited a lot from my stay at the bag factory. So I'll definitely say it's relevant. But you've been working on this kind of projects for a little while now, and have you seen a change? Is there something of concern that you think maybe there is need to rethink how we do things? Maybe you are thinking about how to adapt, but without losing the essentials that make the bag factory.
I suppose my concern is that it's so easy for people to travel now. Artists can come to Johannesburg, whether they're being hosted by the bag factory or not. And I know a lot of artists, they want to have that host and that community when they arrive here. But the difficulty for us is that whereas once upon a time, if an artist was coming to Johannesburg, bag factory would be the first point of call. And so for us, I can't even call it competition, but it's not necessarily that artists or curators want to come and be in residence in a space or be tied to one space. So that's the one thing. And then the second thing, of course, is that as you've all been talking about COVID, and the impact that this is having, and even within the continent. So you mentioned Tila, who was here earlier this year from Angola, and the difficulty of arranging her travel, because Angola just put a stop to travel between South Africa and Angola. So we had to then book her a new flight on Air Ethiopia to fly up north in order to come down south. When we wanted to book her return flight, South African Airways no longer existed. So she had to travel via Namibia to get back to Angola. And then just her treatment at the border by South African border officials who were not very kind to her, because she had left South Africa to go to Mozambique for a research trip, and immediately accused her of doing something illegal, which is insane, because if you travel to France and you pop over to Amsterdam to do some research, no one's going to question, why you were going to more than one country. So yeah, it's still just it's still difficult, and we think it would be easier. We've had virtual residencies last year that took place instead of physical residencies. And I know that's one thing that Griffin Projects are planning as part of this project, is to do virtual residencies. And we're talking about a vast time difference between South Africa and Canada. So I'm curious to get the feedback from our artists who do participate in this program as well. Is it something that can exist in addition to the programs we already run? Or is it just too difficult actually to engage virtually in something that should be so organic and so intimate and so personal? But yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. And to Griffin Projects for the invitation. And yeah, thanks for the provocations. I wish we had another hour to continue the conversation, but as Tim Nkosi is saying, we need to actually have more of them initiated by the Bag Factory and by our alumni.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to thank you, and I want to thank Fadzai, I want to thank Prophet. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Bye.
Okay, so thank you so much to Candace Allison for your moderation and coordination of this lovely conversation that just so intimately captured the Bag Factory's rich history, as well as its diverse projects and current initiatives. And a huge thank you to our panelists, Kahiso Patrick Motloa, Temi Kosi Gomiwe, and Fadzai Muchemwa for sharing your super thoughtful conversations and experiences with the Bag Factory. We so appreciate your time. So we now have our spotlight feature for today. And just to provide a bit of context for those who are joining us for the first time today, throughout the conference, we've planned 3 10-minute micro presentations during which we've been handing over the platform to local Indigenous and BIPOC organizations nominated by conference collaborators and partners. And so today's spotlight organization was actually nominated by Candace Allison of the Bag Factory. And we're so grateful to be able to introduce Ati Patra Ruga, who is a South African-based multidisciplinary contemporary artist, and who is also the CEO and Chief Executive Officer of today's Spotlight organization, which is Victory of the Word. And Victory of the Word is a fundraising and development platform committed to serving independent artists and the preservation of language, both visual and written. So I was very lucky to have had the chance to meet Ati Patra Ruga, who pre-recorded his presentation, and I'm just so delighted to be able to share it today. So just bear with me for one moment as I pull up the video.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ati Patra Ruga, and I would like to introduce you to Victory of the Word and what we are planning on doing for the year of 2021 and 2022. Victory of the Word was Victory of the Word. Why is it sorry? Victory of the Word's values are basically Victory of the Word. We founded in 2020 during the lockdown. The COVID global lockdown. It was to try and keep the doors open of the Lovedale Press and also to sustain the lives of the Lovedale Press custodians open. What is the Lovedale Press? The Lovedale Press is basically a press that was founded in 1823 by Scottish missionaries with the collaboration of the Xhosa Nation, which is in the Eastern Cape, in the Amatole region of the Eastern Cape. In 1823 up until now, this press has seen many destructions through colonial resistance wars, through the resistance to apartheid, and its third war now is happening after the liberation of 1994 in the form of keeping its doors open in the face of the 2008 stock crash, the move towards the English language globally and globalization and forsaking Xhosa language as an expression. And also the rise of social and personal media came into this 200-year-old press coming into difficulties and risking closing. So our dignity plan was to basically raise 300,000 rands, which we have reached 160, for the 3 people who bought it from the Scottish missionaries, 3 Black employees who had bought it from the missionary apparatus. They didn't buy it with any skills when they took it over and did not know how to deal with these various factors that were coming in. So now they risk closing, and we are doing this fundraiser and also at the same time finding new partners, creating ecosystems that will then bring us to the words of language, dignity, and sustainability. For me, I would say the language part is the celebration of the 200-year anniversary of the Lovedale Press, which was responsible for and became a catalyst for the Black intelligentsia that led to liberation movements and also cultural renaissance happening within the Black, Southern African, and Bantu nation. The dignity part is that in the fundraiser, we were able to raise half of the 300,000 rands, which was able to keep the doors open of Lovedale and also sustain physically the people who have not been drawing any income from the presses running. The sustainability is in this creation of new ecosystems that will partake and that will basically create and that will then result in us creating an identity, whether it's a vow identity or a bodyland identity. Our goals in keeping this open are to build strong foundations, to educate people about who we are, and increase number of donations, and also turn those into recurring donations, whether those go towards the memorization of the Lovedale Press and keeping the Lovedale Press open in our hearts, land, and also in our imaginations. We also want to improve awareness of the organization more and more. So more invites for us to actually speak and actually speak of the word and actually just connect with other printers would be very, very, very welcome. The initiation of new ventures is something that we also started. But I think before then, I'd like to reintroduce who the team is and how we go about doing what we do. I'm Ati, and we co-founded our Victory of the Word with Lisa Baldissera, who is an art curator. I'm an artist, a multidisciplinary artist who's been working in performance art, video, and tapestry, and mentoring. The background of these 3 of this land revolves around this place, which is the Lovedale Press. These are images of it. It was a place where so much happened, so much art in the form of the book covers, so much poetry, so much resistance in the books. They published books for the Somafco Center, which was the exile liberation station that the ANC was taking. Poetry that I remember as well personally. This is the contemporary Lovedale. The contemporary Lovedale risks all of these machines and all the stock at the places closing as they now rent their space from a fruit and veg packer. So it was with the Lovedale Press fundraising platform that we managed to raise 160 out of 300,000 rands, and also got some leeway in the country whereby a reawakening was happening to people ranging from all ages, those who were raised with the books of Lovedale, and also those who were really concerned about the legacy of Lovedale not lasting for their children and their children's children. But the vow of Bodyland is that we've also come to realize that we have to welcome new and imaginative ways. If the printing press does die, we do need to think of new ways in which we can embody all of that 200 years of knowledge. And this happened as a stroke whereby we invited 8 artists to come and partake in another product that we have created at our Victory of the Word, which is that of the Bodyland Residency Incubator. The open call was sent last year for a period that would start on the 24th until the 7th of November, where these 8 artists would come to the actual venue where the first Xhosa word was written, which is the Valley. And these are the 8 occupants who successfully, out of 60 applications, all of these applicants came from all over the Eastern Cape in all their various mediums, and the direction was to have them from as many different mediums as possible so that they could actually bring in what was happening in the land. So the place that we took part on was a mountain called Hogsback, where I as an artist have a studio and also have a place whereby the artist was staying. So the residency is happening in Hogsback, and Hogsback is at the top of the apex in and overlooking the valley in which the Lovedale Press has happened in its many forms. So what we did with these 8 artists is that we took them throughout all these various venues, from the valley where the first Xhosa word was written to where the first Xhosa hymn, Christian hymn, was written, and how the many politics of collision, the politics of assimilation, and the politics of resistance came out. It was quite a beautiful experience. And it is with this that they are making new works and also are in a position now to spread the word from the various works. And it is through our Instagram pages, our social media pages, that you will also get to see how these artists have embodied the fact that we have a printing press that's 200 years old that needs to move into the future. Their bodies will then become the archive. They will be the receptacles of the archive. And it is also through translations and also digitization, importantly, that we'll be able to spread the word and have the Xhosa words that were written 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 10 years ago, before the stock market crash, once again live. We still need people to write about coronavirus in the Xhosa language and the effects of it in the mind, body, and spirit. And in the tradition of Lovedale Press, we would love to take that responsibility on with your help. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted there. Thanks, Lisa. Again, I was just saying a big thank you to Ati for his wonderful presentation and for just sharing the amazing initiative that is Victory of the Word. And we hope that you take a moment to check out some of those links that were shared in the chat. So we'll now take just a 5-minute break before jumping into our next panel, which is titled Mide-wigwas Birchbark Scrolls and is organized and presented by our amazing conference partner, Dana Warren of Urban Shaman, who will be in conversation with Jessica Jacobson Cohnfall and Angelina Mcleod. So we'll take just a 5-minute break and we'll see everyone in just a moment.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Bonjour, Angelina.
Sorry, Jazz, we're just doing a quick sound test. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thanks, Jazz. Jazz, can you just say something, please?
Yep, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can totally hear you now. Okay, great.
Perfect. Dana, you seem to be echoing quite a bit.
Yeah, sorry, we just got lots of mics and lots of cameras. Sorry.
No worries.
Just let us know. We're pretty much ready now, so.
Okay, great. Hello and welcome back, everybody. And welcome for those who might just be joining us now. I'm delighted to introduce our next panel of the day, which is moderated by Dana Warren of Urban Shaman, who will be in conversation today with Jessica Jacobson Cohnfall and Angelina Mcleod. So I'm delighted to once again introduce our conference partner and the panel moderator, Dana Warren. So Dana Warren is from the Agamic or Cree Nation in Musqueam, Bear Hills, Alberta. She was awarded 2 Canada Council's Aboriginal curatorial residencies, the first to work with Grunt Gallery in Vancouver, BC in 2000 to 2001, and a second residency at the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, Ontario from 2010 to 2011. She was awarded a BFA from the Emily Carr University of Art and Design in 2003 and an MA from UBC in 2012. And Warren was awarded the 2015 Emily Award from Emily Carr University and was selected as one of 6 Indigenous women curators as part of the Canada Council for the Arts delegation to participate in the International First Nations Curators Exchange that took place in Australia in 2015, in New Zealand in 2016, and in Canada in 2017. And Dana's most recent accomplishment was winning the Natition Foundation Award for Curatorial Excellency in 2018. And she is currently, of course, the director of Urban Shaman Contemporary Aboriginal Art in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So thanks so much, Dana, and I'll just pass it right over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jazz. Can everybody shut their phones off, please? So we have a very complex, technically complex presentation that we're going to do our best from. Yes, I am a disembodied voice for this panel. And so I will be working the slideshows and we got a bit of film that we want to show in relation to the exhibition that's up currently. So first, I just thought maybe I'd go a little into Urban Shaman and who we are and what we do. Urban Shaman Contemporary Aboriginal Art Gallery, it's a big mouthful sometimes to say, is an artist-run center. And from the previous discussion, it sounded like that people have a pretty good understanding of what artist-run centers are. But just in case, I know there was a question posed of what does that mean and what does that mean for urban? And so for us, it's pretty much directly that title, artist-run. Most of the board members are working artists, as well as some from various other backgrounds. And since we are an indigenously mandated organization, over 50% of our board members are required to be Indigenous, which is really exciting as well. I've had comments from various people that sorry, there's people coming into the space. It's a very busy space. And so a lot of the people that have said, as mentioned, that there's actually a lot more non-native participation on our board and within our staff. So I think that's kind of really telling of the times. And so I just feel like a lot of the people that we work with are such incredible allies, and they're so helpful to the work that we do and the outreach that requires an indigenously mandated gallery to get out there. Sorry. It's a community space. And so, yeah, Urban Shaman's been in existence for 25 years. It's our 25th anniversary this year, so it's so exciting. Urban Shaman was created as a space in regards to just supporting Indigenous artists, because in the city back in the 90s, the early 90s, when kind of Indigenous contemporary art was really kind of making a movement onto the national art stage. Artists were still really struggling to get their work out into the community, especially around the city. And they were really challenged to have curators interested in their work, finding spaces to show their work. I guess even just working with other artists, non-native artists. And so our founder, who's actually come back to the organization after many years, he's our board president now, Louis Ogama, he was the one that had the brainchild to create this space. And so he was graduating from the School of Art at the University of Manitoba here with a group of his colleagues and graduates. And they were sitting around a fire one night and decided to give birth to Urban Shaman. And actually the exciting part is that they did this when they were sitting around the fire and they were signing the incorporation papers for our business license. So it's always had this very kind of grassroots beginnings, and really exciting just to see how far Urban Shaman's grown and the development we have. So what I'll do is I'm just gonna share a few images from past programming. And am I able to screen share, Jazz?
Yes, you should be able to, Dana.
Okay, great. I'm just going to grab it here, and here we go. These ladies are so patiently going to wait while they're uncomfortably put on camera. So this is some my presentation I usually give for other things, but it's kind of a general overview of what we've been doing over the years. And this is kind of the programming also reflects my curatorial way of work as well, which is it's a bit political. I try to have a lot of kind of more play and I don't know, just a really good visual and sensory aesthetics to a lot of the work that I bring in. So this is a crazy performance that happened, and we were very packed. I think we were over capacity legally for the amount of bodies we had in our space. But it's more of a tongue-in-cheek piece that was touring around Canada. And there was a big leg wrestling match. So I'm not sure if people from South Africa or other parts of Canada might know what this means, but leg wrestling is kind of a spoof on using your legs to kind of outwit and outmatch your opponent. But this time they were trying to do it all together and it wasn't quite successful. That looks a little crazy. And so a lot of the programming, I try to make sure there's a diversity because there's such a huge diversity in Indigenous artists across Canada. We have Inuit from the north, Métis, and as we were so brilliantly told by Carolyn earlier today, the consideration of half-bred, half-breed, people who are of mixed races, of both native and non-native. Then this artist is from the East Coast, a really amazing artist that is very well respected across Canada. Can you just give me the 10-minute kind of? I just don't want to go over time and use up these ladies' amazing presentation. So he bases a lot of his stuff on traditional stories and iconography from East Coast culture. Those of you in Vancouver might recognize this name, Skeena Reese. She's a very forward-thinking Indigenous artist, an amazing performance artist. She's really strong, as you can tell from the grenade on the back of this button blanket. She's kind of a bit political, and she also is like Prairie Cree. So she's Prairie Cree and also West Coast culture. So that's why there's a roach on her head. This is her in her regalia that she made for this piece. Super cool. And I put this as 5 years now. I can't believe it was 5-year anniversary for this show. It's like I really wanted to acknowledge the amount of people that have gone through here. I've only been working at the gallery for 10 years. And then, like I said, it's been 25 years in the making. But for this show, it was really kind of tested me to try and figure out like how do you encapsulate an organization that's been around and has such amazing Indigenous artists go through it and be able to like nod towards all these people and their projects that have happened. So for this one, as I mentioned about the signing the incorporation papers around the fire, that's how I came up with the title, The Fire Throws Sparks. So I wanted to kind of have this idea of a fire sparking ignition, sparking inspiration, sparking intellect. And so a lot of the pieces I chose from these past members that have been through the gallery, who have created the gallery, I wanted to acknowledge their work and some really integral points in their careers. And so Rebecca Belmore is kind of the big one that we all like absolutely adore. And I don't know if everybody knows who Rebecca Belmore is, but she's the first Indigenous woman to represent Canada at the Venice Biennale. So that was a huge milestone for Indigenous peoples, and especially Indigenous women artists, because we kind of still are the last ones to the table. But it seems like as our artistic environment is changing within Canada, there's a huge upswing to indigenize organizations and academia. There seems to be a lot more opportunities now for Indigenous artists to display their work. So considering where the gallery started and to where we are now, it's been a huge shift. I mean, there's still a lot of work that still needs to happen to support Indigenous artists, but I really feel that there's a lot more opportunities now and recognition of the work that we bring to the artistic table. So I thought I'd just maybe show one or two. Is it almost 10 minutes? Okay. Yeah, so like I mentioned, there's some Inuit show. This is actually not my curatorial programming. It's actually by Stéphane Saint Laurent, another ally of ours who is based out of Gatineau in Quebec. He did this really amazing research project and went to the north and really kind of explored artists who weren't probably getting as much recognition as some of the other ones. And so they came back with all these amazing ways that artists were producing art objects. These are like traditional snow goggles, but instead of them being carved out of bone or stone, these are made out of sterling silver, and they're really gorgeous. Some very high heel sealskin shoes. This one's my favorite. This is a massive drawing on black paper with white conte and all that stuff. And we had this walk-in installation, which was incredible, where these artists went up to the north and worked with a collective of artists up there. And so when the title of the show is called Flow Edge, but flow edge refers to this line where the icebergs will move against each other as they melt and refreeze again. And so with this piece, they were actually graffitiing on the icebergs. And so as it was melting throughout the daytime, they would sync with the other iceberg and graffiti and paint on the side of the other iceberg. And so it's not totally safe, but really incredible work. And they also used a lot of organic dyes and stuff. So they weren't using like spray paints and things like that. They tried to make sure it was very kind of suitable for the environment. And so for our space, like I really feel that it's a jumping off point for a lot of people's careers. A lot of people have had their first solo show here. This was Dee Barzi, which was a couple years ago. She's one of the artists from around here that have had a springboard to their art career, and she's now currently going to Concordia to get her MFA. But the great thing was that I really wanted her to kind of consider the space as her own big palette. And so usually she works in kind of a smaller canvas type style, but she's been doing a lot of big murals around the city of Winnipeg. And so I approached her and I was like, would you consider like just painting the whole gallery? And so it was such a kind of sensory experience to walk into this blue of the whole gallery, and you'll get a sense of the gallery once we go to the live feed here. But yeah, so a lot of this was like, it was just really amazing to be immersed in this incredibly blue color that's very signature of her style. And then I'll just maybe quickly mention this. This is, we've been doing a lot more outreach, and this is one of the international shows where they had mentioned the Curatorial Exchange that I had participated in. And from that exchange, the curator from Pa'ataka Art Museum, he invited us to do a project with them to do an exhibition exchange. And so I sent 13 artists over from Canada. I sent a lot of work. And then in response, he also sent quite a few artists as well. So he based his on a lot of new media work and just really cool ideas of how Indigenous artists are using new media. This is one of my favorite projects from the Maoris. It was like an app where you could hold it up to the artwork, and it would do something like something would happen within the app on your phone. So as you can see, there's a fire igniting in front of her. So, all right, yeah, it's hard to throw in 10 so much ideas, and I'm gonna hand it over to the ladies, but I'll just quickly discuss here. I'll stop screen sharing here. There we go. They're very hot. We're actually having a huge heat wave right now, so we're under a heat warning today. So we're hot Winnipeg, hot Winnipeggers. I heard Vancouver was having a massive heat wave a little while ago. So Jessica Jacobson Conefall, do you want to give a wave there, Jess? She is an assistant professor of Canadian art and theory at the School of Fine Art and Music, University of Guelph. Her research interests include Canadian and Indigenous art, Marxist feminism, critical theory, Indigenous and critical race theory, and post-structuralist theories. Her current Shirk Insight development project focuses on ecological aesthetics in Treaty 1 and Treaty 3 territory, Manitoba and Ontario. She's working on 2 book chapters on the relationship between energy resources and contemporary arts in Canada, and writing a monograph focused on the art of Rebecca Belmore and other contemporary artists in light of the question, what does it mean to be here in a good way? She's also a practicing artist. And just going over to Angelina. And so Angelina, do you want to give a wave? we got 2 cameras, so you guys can only see one view from right now. So Angelina Mcleod is an emerging filmmaker, writer, and documentary subject from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. Angelina is a land and water defender who is passionate about sharing Anishinaabe history, culture, language, and stories. Her research is focused on Mide-wigwas and Birchbark scrolls that were once held by her granduncle, James Red Sky, who was a World War I veteran and prominent member of the Mide-wigwas, interpreted the scrolls before they were sold to the Glenbow Museum in Calgary for preservation. Angelina is currently working on a series of short films. Actually, you have produced these short films. I guess this bio is a little dated, with the National Film Board of Canada. And it's about her community, Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, the source of Winnipeg's drinking water. So it's been really important for us when we do our land acknowledgements, that I feel it's really great to do a water acknowledgement because of her community and how important and politicized it is. So we'll get into that incredible discussion in a few moments. Shall I play the film first? Yes? Okay. How many minutes? About. Okay. Okay, sorry, we're still just kind of working out some thing on the line. Can everybody see that?
We're not hearing it, Dana. I don't know if there's sound yet.
Any of our people from back home. Because in order for you to make cement concrete, you have to use water. And guess what?
Yes.
I think about it every time I go to the city. And every time I'm there, every restaurant I go to, you know, I always say, you know, give me some of that Shoal Lake water.
Good to see you again.
Nice seeing you all.
Oh, wanna go check out the road now?
Yeah, let's go check it out.
All right. I miss being out here.
Yeah. So you're driving back and forth from
Kenora every day, 7 days a week.
Oh, that must be tiring. Eh?
Yeah, it gets tiring after a while. I've been doing it for a year now, but that's looking forward to moving home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much things have changed here. Like my parents' house.
Yeah.
The roundhouse.
The roundhouse, yeah.
Cecil's house isn't even there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first time I left, the first time actually ever leaving the community, I was when I just turned 18. And I was joining the military. Like anybody else who leaves the community, right? No houses, no jobs, you know, and I was a combat engineer in the airborne regiment. And what we did there was we built bridges and we built roads. So that prepared me for 30 years or so down the road. You know, I look forward to that day when I can help my community do something, and it happened.
This is where actual Freedom Road starts, right here. This is the beginning. So basically we finished wrapping up the first 8.7 kilometers of the road, all the way up to the reserve line, right up to there.
And then there's lots of work ahead.
Yeah, and this is the rest of the road, and it's already been cut.
April 14th, 2014, there was a strategy session. And how should we do this? What should we do? And had a direct action workshop for the community members and anybody who was interested in participating in direct action Our people prior to that were very frustrated by the fact that nobody was listening to us. We had a good cross-section of community members that showed up, women, youth, elders, men. And we need a political plan, we need a mobilization plan, we need a medium plan, we need a legal plan, we need a settler ally mobilization plan, all these plans that have to be taken into account before you do a direct action. And that's how it started, allowing the community to be fully engaged in a campaign. Everything was well strategized, everything was well thought of, everything was planned. People think it just happened. No, it didn't. Everybody did their part, everybody did their bit, and we all succeeded.
I'm really impressed with everything that's been happening with the road. So everything is changing so quickly, and it looks so nice from the last time we were here.
Yeah. We originally started building the road. The band put a training program together. We had about, 20, 30 people involved in that. And that was our workforce for this project. This is the first time anybody's ever had that opportunity to make some good money,
And this is where they first started blasting?
Yeah, right here.
I always see that car everywhere, too.
Yeah, it's around.
It seems to be something like a trademark of this road being built.
Yeah.
This place is very rich in history. Where our grandfathers lived, back in the day, even their grandfathers, that was like a major highway because everybody had to paddle through here. Now, I always picture that in my mind, what it would have been like to see these people paddling by in these big canoes, and think about our people then and the way things, the way life was.
About 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, the city of Winnipeg, 100 miles west from here, was looking for a new water source. And they were looking all over Manitoba, and one engineer happened to find Shoal Lake. And he ended up at our shoreline here in our village where we used to occupy, exactly where the intake sits right now. We used to occupy that piece of land when the engineer showed up. That's where everything started for us. Having all our lands expropriated from us and being relocated, and that's where everything started from.
So their old village used to be where the aqueduct is.
Yeah.
I remember them saying that they took the gravel from the aqueduct and used it on the dike.
Yeah, some of the gravel that was used to build this, they excavated the remains of our ancestors.
Yeah.
The earth, the rock, the soil that was there was used to make this dike. Literally, we were walking on our ancestors. That's very troubling when I found that out. You know why they built this dike in the first place? When they completed construction of the aqueduct and they came to turn the water on the other end was brown. It was just a natural discoloration, and that was it. It was perfectly safe to drink, but they didn't like the color. And so they came back with this idea to divert that colored water away from the intake and keep it on this side here. On one side, the water goes to the community, and on the other side, the water goes to Winnipeg. It gets a bit emotional when I revisit the issue because of the stuff that's happened to our people and what our people have suffered through all these years.
I'm a residential school survivor. Had a very traumatic background and upbringing as a result. I mean, as everybody knows, that nobody's really escaped from that part of our history. Those are life lessons for me now that I walk in our traditional way. Understanding what my grandfather's teachings are, the elders' teachings, our ancestors, everything that they've done was done through ceremony. That's important to keep that alive, to honor the ancestors, to carry them forward, and so that we don't lose our identity, that we remain who we are. My grandfather was one of the last leading holy men of the Mide society in the area. The old Mide is full of love and kindness. That is our people, and that is what the Mide teaches. With what our ancestors lived and preserved for us. Today, when we look at that, when I say love and kindness, that's following the good life. Minobe mataziwan is how we say it. That's what it teaches, and that's what you get out of it, is the good life, following that road. Minobe mataziwan. I'm on that journey. I've acknowledged the fact of my history, my background, my lineage. As I get older, I think about those kind of things, and our fathers and our grandfathers have always struggled to get us out, and have fought hard to get somewhere with the road. The isolation, being kept in poverty, and all of that.
I'm just looking down here and I'm just thinking about all the hard work that's been put into the road and everything. And you were mentioning before, like, our parents, and you could see their dreams coming true, right?
But it's been a long, hard battle, you know, all the history to get here that brought us to this point, addressing all that. And I mean, this has been quite a journey, and even just coming down here on this little trip with you has been, you know, I think it's important, you know, like to have that conversation, you know, go back about the history and share stuff about ourselves and what we've been through. That's all part of it, you know, community coming together.
I want to talk about your dad for a second. So while my work as Ogichita, I've hosted several Warrior Societies meetings in our community. And in one meeting, we had a feast. We had a good spread of food all around, feast food all around, and pipes, you know, and okay, we need an elder. So I wanted to walk to your dad's house, knock on the door, I said, "Kibe bogosene amigo, dina. Kibe bogosene min, dina. Should be back in the man o kind of big young ma. Dina, I'm get your tag my yag, mize bunja yag. It's like sweet to me, man, dina. Kibe bogosene min should be back in the man. Come to ask you to bless and open our feast for our meeting." I said, we'll get stuff from all over the country. Before you didn't take my tobacco yet, he says, "Hashpi, kima check kenda man, kish chigain, kish pin panabi a po ajan." Dig, he said to me, "How are you ever going to learn what to do if you keep coming running to us?" He says. "You cannot shigish chigain. You know what to do," he said. I was like, okay. So that was a teaching. He was telling me in a stern way, pick it up and do it. And ever since then, I've been doing my own feasts because of your father. And he's right. We know what to do. We just have to do it.
So I think Jess is up next, right? Are you going to do a bit of a presentation?
Anna, do you think anyone heard what I just said?
We didn't.
You did hear?
We didn't.
No. Okay. Okay. So I was making a joke at my own expense, just saying that I wrote a paper, which is like an academic compulsion within me that I can barely hold at bay at the best of times. So I did that, but I'm not going to use it. And I'm just going to do, I think, an open-ended interview. That's what we're going to do. And so we're also going to look at an excerpt of a recording of Angelina's performance for the show that's installed in the gallery right now, Mide-wigwas Transmediating. And so I'm just going to start right now, following that introduction to Angelina's film series, by asking her to tell us a little bit about her films. And maybe I'll just say, Angelina and I have been working together through an advocacy group called Friends of Shoal Lake 40 for a number of years. And so we know each other personally and through that work, and have worked together in the production of this exhibit. It's also, so this is sort of the background of our relationship, but we also, or I would also like to add that these films, so the 5 films that she's made with the NFB, are going to be playing on a continuous loop in the Marvin Francis Media Gallery, which is adjacent to this main gallery space through the duration of the exhibit. And so we only got to see the introductory section of it just now, but it's also available to view as a series on the National Film Board of Canada website. And so for those of you who are interested, there's 4 more film works by Angelina that are very compelling and that I do strongly recommend. Okay, so I'm going to ask, and if you could tell us a little bit about the film project.
Okay, the Freedom Road series was actually just happened. Actually, I wasn't involved in the beginning process of the film at all. There was actually a non-Indigenous filmmaker that was working on the films, and that pitched the story in the beginning, but that ended up changing it. Yeah, and then I met the producer Alicia Smith, and then she found out I had some film experience and all that, and that's how I came on the project, and it's as a co-director. And for the first film, the context film, for the Freedom Road series, we actually did a series of 5. The first one is the context film, the one that was just seen, that tells the history of the aqueduct and how Shoal Lake 40 was relocated, and the land was expropriated, and we were moved to an isolated island. And that's where I started learning. I actually started learning a lot more about our history through the filmmaking process. And but we made sure that we consulted with the community on everything we did to make sure everything was done proper, and everything was done in a good way, so that we didn't misrepresent anything. And we followed cultural protocols, the traditional governance system of the community, because there's a series of 5, so there's women, men, children, and elders. So that's how we made the films. And through the process of the road being built over 2 years, yeah. And so the women pretty much, in the women's film, they it's called Ikwewag. They outline the struggles of what it's like to be mothers in the community, and female leaders, and yeah, they just tell their stories and struggles about what life is like crossing the road without road access, and living that way, and risking their lives every day, crossing the ice. And with the men's film, they talk about a lot of not the same thing, the struggles about the community, and about their work in the community, my friend that I grew up with, Lauren Redsky, is featured in that film. He's was one of the water operators, but that's a really stressful position to hold, because the responsibility of making sure everybody's water was running and everybody had water to drink is a really big responsibility. And I realize that now that I work in the community, because after the Freedom Road series, I started working in the community as a band counselor. And so now I could see firsthand, because the film process actually brought me back home and reconnected me back with the community. And I just felt the film process actually reconnected me with everybody, because they told me really intimate stories. And we actually had to have most of our film crew outside, because they didn't feel comfortable with all these with a big film crew. So there was just me, my sound, and my DOP, the camera operator there. So that's how I was able to get the more intimate stories of the community members and the youth as well. That's where I really connected the most with, because their struggles were my struggles. Like when I was a youth and leaving home at 14 just to attend school, and that's how I got separated from my community. Because many people don't even know, to this day, that we're sent away from our home communities to go live in boarding homes with strangers. Usually they're white strangers. And when I left, I had to pray at the dinner table, and it was a whole different cultural shock to me. And yeah, so the youth pretty much echo pretty much what I've been through, about them leaving home and not being able to fit in two worlds, back in the reservation and back in Kenora. It's a big struggle. And yeah, and then we also have the Elders film. They tell the stories about what life is like in the community and their hardships, and what it's like to finally see the road completed, and us no longer being able to, having to struggle to get our groceries and just our basic needs to live, like water and all that. And through this process as well, we were able to get the road finished, and we were able to get our water treatment plant. So that's actually finishing this fall, which is actually a huge accomplishment, thanks to Friends of Shoal Lake 40 and our allies and all that. And what made me, I would like to say, what made me empowered me to do all this stuff was finding out about these Birchbark scrolls and learning more about them and learning the stories on them. I just felt power, I don't know how to explain it, I guess, spiritual connection to the community and my ancestors. And I don't know, I feel like a different person after seeing the scrolls, and then everything just came together. When I found out about the scrolls, it's a really, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah.
Okay, so there's just a note I wanted to make as I was listening to your answer around some of the still images that are in this exhibit in the space. Some of them are stills from the films, and some of them are old black and white archival photographs that are held by the City of Winnipeg Archives, who are trying to engage in a sort of better relationship with Shoal Lake 40 as a community, and that includes how the history is framed. And so part of the relationship between the films and the archival photographs speaks to a lot of the themes that you're describing in the films. And so I just wanted to make a note of that for myself to ask you another question about it in a minute. Okay, so do you want to tell us more about the Birchbark scrolls that you were referencing in your last answer?
Okay. Actually, when I didn't even really know too much about the scrolls. I heard about them a little bit when I was growing up, about these Mide-wigwas scrolls. But it was actually till I went to university and met my advisor. He's now my master's thesis advisor, Nigon Sinclair. He actually showed me a book, and then he showed me the other book with Selwyn Dewdney, and then I was blown away. I was like, wow, these are where my ancestors carried these Birchbark scrolls, and I didn't know, like, that's that was part of my history and all that. And so I did more research, and then I found out there was a set of 7, but actually I hear there's actually 8. But yeah, they tell the creation of man, the Anishinaabe migration story. There's many other stories on there as well. Like I don't want to give it away too much because some of them are really sacred, so I don't want to share that right now. But I will just share a little bit. But there's 7, but they tell really there's lots of stuff. I'm not sure how to answer that one because I just don't want to share too much stuff that's too much sacred knowledge. That's I don't feel sometimes I have to watch what, like, I make sure I'm following cultural protocols and doing everything in the right way. And I just want to, I just have that. But these scrolls, there's lots, they contain photography, like what you see in what you will see here in the exhibit, like the spirit manitous, which are spirit animals, which represent how in the first one here I used in the one that in the installation here in my performance I used mainly the ones just the animal manitous that are in the Ojibwe and the Anishinaabe migration story.
And so one of the things that really struck me watching your performance last week was the way that there seemed to be a connection between the manitous and the figures in the archival photographs, and that part of the work that you were doing was sort of orienting relationships between these sort of official, like, City of Winnipeg archives and sort of reframing the history of those images in a way that just was so stunning to witness. And so I was wondering too, if you could say a little bit about where the scrolls currently reside and what the sort of plans or goals are around their ongoing relationship with your community.
Okay. Right now the scrolls are in the Glenbow Museum. I got to visit those scrolls last year, and I got to spend time with them, and I had ceremony with them, and it was actually a very emotional and very spiritual experience for me. Yeah, and so I at the museum, so I got to I transcribed 3 of the stories on the scrolls, and those scrolls are like that you see, like, just these images on them, but there's more to it than just a few images. They're very, very long stories attached to them. It's not just a few images. And I was actually blown away by that. I was like, whoa, these tell more than just what you see on the scrolls. So these are big stories, and these are form of literature before settlers arrived, and since time immemorial that we've had for literature, like these are a form of books in these days. And but in my talks with the Glenbow, yeah, so there is a possibility of a repatriation and bringing the scrolls back home, and I think that would be a really good thing for the community, because everybody can reconnect with the culture, the language, and their ancestry. And I think that it will empower them if we are able to get these scrolls back. And right now, that was one of the goals of the museums, is they're trying to change things around and giving giving our sacred items back and to the community. Yeah.
Okay, so related to the topic of relationships with museums, I was wondering if I could ask you about Shoal Lake 40's relationship with the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. So the museum in Winnipeg, so the Canadian Museum of Human Rights when it was built and ongoing, and then the museum that your community created on the reserve, which is the Museum of Canadian Human Rights Violations. In response to the building of the CMHR. So I was just wondering if you could tell us something about that.
Okay, well, I can talk about the Museum for Human Rights Violations. Well, that museum we had up was created by Kyler and Stuart Red Sky. Stuart was actually a very prominent member of our community. He's just passed away about a month ago. But yeah, so but those stories, it tells the history, like it's like archival media, like news clippings from newspapers, meetings with all the ministers for since my dad was chief, since the 60s and 70s, and so it tells all those things in a timeline. They were against the wall at the arena, but yeah, they actually suffered some water damage. So hopefully we can restore those. But yeah, that's basically what they outline, is just the history and all of our struggles and our fight for the clean water, and our fight for a road, and our fight for everything, because we have new housing coming, and we have a new school and everything. So we had it's just like a museum about our struggles and our fight for what we need, and our fight for basic human rights. Yeah.
Thanks. I just wanted to share with the audience that one of the things that was most striking to me visiting the Museum of Canadian Human Rights Violations in Angelina's community is that at the top of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, or CMHR, they have a contemplative pool of water around which is many rocks that they brought from Ireland, speaking to the troubles and the history of colonialism and violence in Ireland. And so it was ironic that they had water from Shoal Lake in that contemplative pool, meant to be sort of the pinnacle of your human rights journey in their museum, with no acknowledgement of where the water came from or what that had to do with human rights on these lands and in this place. And so it was a very striking juxtaposition I found. And also I guess I just wanted to recall the way that meeting in the community with Stuart and Kyler and Daryl was very different, because it's sort of a personal relationship. It's very different to be in a place with people and hear about their experiences and sort of physically be there, as opposed to learning about something in the confines of, for example, the traditional archive. And so or traditional colonial archive, I should say. And just wanting to sort of make that connection with one of the funders for this exhibit, which is a SSHRC project called Archive Counter Archive. And I know that we had been talking earlier and you didn't really feel that the word counter archive was that relevant to your practice necessarily, but I just wanted to mention it as a kind of aspect of what there was a phrase that came from the bag factory discussion the other day of networked connections. And so I'm just wanting to sort of thread some of those connections into this interview and conversation of advocacy groups, Mide-wigwas society, university, arts practice, and all the sort of ways that these things have converged in Angelina's work very powerfully. Okay, so this show includes archival photos of the aqueduct being built, as well as ancestors. And I wanted to ask you why this is important, why these photographs are related to one another, and why this was important to you.
Well, this is really important to me because I want people to learn more about our history of, especially Winnipeggers, about where their water comes from, and want them to acknowledge the harms that were done to our community members and our community and the land and water, not just and the animals and the fish and all that. It's done a lot to our community. Like, we can't even eat the fish anymore. We can't drink from the lake. We can't even swim in the water. And meanwhile, Winnipeg has clean water coming from their taps, and we still have to rely on the bottled water until our water treatment plant is finished. And that's well, yeah, it's really emotional for me to talk about that, because we suffered many losses in our fight, during our fight for the road and for clean drinking water. Yeah. Sorry, it's just a really emotional question for me, because it really hits me like in the heart a lot, because seen a lot of my family suffering, and myself as well, and my family, and I had to pick myself up and keep moving and keep fighting for our people. That's what kept me going and keep me strong, is fighting for others and to get our clean drinking water and to get the road. And I just wanted people to notice like what has happened to our community, and hopefully they can acknowledge that and help raise awareness for other Indigenous communities enter the island, and to help them as well, because I know our community is going to be doing better and in the future, like for our children and our grandchildren. And I'm actually really proud of our community members for keeping that fight. And that's what I have outlined around here is our community. I wanted to make sure I included a community, because we did this together, and it wasn't just one person, it was the whole community. Like, we all came together and fought for all these things together, like for over 100 years. Yeah, especially my dad, and like in the films, as you see, Daryl's dad, and our everything, like all our dads were fighting for it, and then it feels like we took over and we stepped into their shoes, and it just felt like a natural thing, and it was a natural thing to do. Yeah.
And so my next question is, why did you, so the part of this exhibit, it's sort of transmedia. So there's the films running, there's archival photographs from the Winnipeg Archive, there's archival materials from your community, including a letter from your dad, some catalog information about the scrolls at the Glenbow, and also a performance. So the what remains of a performance you undertook in the space, and a performance video that's going to be projected. And so I'm just curious about how you see the relationship between, well, first of all, how do you see performance in your own performance? And then how does it relate to the other media in the exhibit?
Okay. Well, my performance was, I wanted to make sure that I'm very strict with my cultural protocols and everything that I do. And so I wanted to make sure this was done in a good way, and that, because I know the ancestors are watching at all time. And so I wanted to make sure that as I was including everything that I was taught by my dad, because my dad was one of the community healers, and he was Mide-wigwas as well. I'm first degree Mide-wigwas, and I went through so many ceremonies just to gain that degree. But yeah, so that, and then it outlines, because even when we were making the Freedom Road series, we made sure we were following we were always putting tobacco down. We were always following cultural protocols, smudging everything every time. And we always acknowledge the beings, the spiritual beings that were amongst us, like in the rocks and all around us. Yeah, and so that's what I wanted to do with the exhibit as well. I just wanted to incorporate the how important ceremony and cultural protocols are in when you are doing anything with media and anything just like sharing your knowledge. Like, and that's how I did the performance. Like I just pretty much remade the process of the struggles of our community, and I want to show how the images from the scrolls empowered myself, and how they can empower the community. So that's why I incorporated all that. And I just remember lots of things my dad always talked about, and that's pretty much was thinking about my parents a lot when I thought about these ideas for the performance, the ceremony, and the rocks and the road and the gravel and the water. Yeah.
One of the things that just sticks out to me is the bag factory discussion included the phrase centers and margins. And I just thought it was interesting, like connecting some of what you're saying maybe in the discussion later to what Dana's had to say about urban shaman and, some of the other panels that have happened, but the way that the photographs are around and then the performances in the center of the space, like that there's just something interesting about the way that it's laid out in here that I think is really powerful. And, I'll be grateful to think about more as the show opens. Okay, so I think we're going to show a small clip of the performance. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so I guess we're over time. So I was just, I maybe just remark, and we might have time to talk about this later too in the discussion, but I noticed a connection between Mide-wigwas and the road, both in the introductory film and in your performance. And I think that is such a generative relationship, because we like the sort of, okay, I'm just going to say colonial archival understanding of infrastructure and the way what infrastructure signifies, and how this performance and what you and Daryl have to say in the film completely reorients it. I think that's so powerful, and so I'm sort of blown away there. And maybe the final question could be, why is this project important to you overall? Very broad strokes, wrap up question.
I already answered this, but well, yeah, I think it's really important for people to learn more about our history, especially where the source, the drinking water came from, like Winnipeg, Winnipeggers, and also for Canadians to acknowledge the harms done to Indigenous Canadians here on Turtle Island. I call it Turtle Island. But yeah, just for people to learn more about our history and culture and our languages, and that we've always had a form of our forms of literature, and they're just not just weren't made into like English words like they are today, and we can learn from one another, and hopefully in a good way, like as Daryl says, and as I always say too, and that's what I wanted to incorporate in this performance and in this exhibit. Yeah, I just wanted everyone to learn more about the Mide-wigwas Society, and about these Birchbark scrolls and Show Lake, and our ways of life, and hopefully everybody can live together in this and learn from this exhibit. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, the organizers, for having us and giving us the opportunity to share this interview with you. And I understand we're taking a break before meeting again. Oh, we're going straight into it. Okay, thanks so much.
Also, I don't know if I'm on camera here. I'll just sit down really quickly. We've got such a complex setup here, but hopefully it's going across smoothly. I just wanted to also thank from some very special sponsors and donors. Special funding came from Canada Council for the Arts and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, which is SSHRC, and Archives, Counter Archives. They've been amazing for this exhibition and great sponsors. And so, yeah, I just want to acknowledge their participation. And our regular sponsors are the Winnipeg Arts Council, the Manitoba Arts Council, Canada Council for the Arts, NCI, and the Winnipeg Foundation, and the Government of Manitoba, and Wawanesa Insurance. So I just want to make sure that we named all of our partners and donors. So I'm going to go back behind the camera again. I feel like kind of the wizard in Wizard of Oz here, and listen for questions, and also put them in the chat. And I'll read them out to the ladies as we go through. Unfortunately, the first panelist can't participate in this next part of the dialogue, but we will do our best to have all of you attendees participate in this part of the conversation. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Dana. And I'll just jump on here with my voice just to let audience members know that if your preference is to ask your question out loud, we are happy to provide you the opportunity to do so. You could just raise a yellow virtual hand. But I do mention that we are just recording So we do have a question in the Q&A. Dana, is your preference to read them, or just let me know how I could help moderate, whatever works. And I think we also have a question from Lisa. Lisa, if you'd like to perhaps start us off.
Yes, and it's sort of.
So Lisa has a question.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Answer it.
So
the first question is about, can you just say a little bit about what we're seeing in the Birchbark scroll images that are overlaid in the video?
You guys hear me? Yes. Okay. The ones I used in the performance are the animal manitous. Yeah, so they're like the Migas shell, the bear's tongue, the crane, and basically the animal manitous that are in that creation story. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Angelina. And that was a question from Amy. So Amy, thank you for your question. And I think Lisa is going to come on. She'll just unmute herself and she'll ask her question out loud. Jessica and Angelina, I'm not sure if you're able to hear the questions.
It's a transcribing as well on our screen. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, I'll just go ahead. It really relates to the last question, actually. I just was very curious about the journey of the Birchbark works to the Glenbow, and I wondered if you might just say a little bit more about that, how they came to be there.
Okay. From what my understanding is, well, what I heard, but there's conflicting stories about how that happened. James Red Sky, my grand uncle, was working with Selwyn Dewdney on that book, The Sacred Scrolls of the Ojibwe, and so the Glenbow Museum offered him $5,000 for these scrolls, and there was actually nobody to hand these scrolls to, no predecessor, I can't pronounce that well, to hand them to, because our culture was being lost and there was nobody else to teach them to at the time. So, and he was aging and all that, getting older, and they needed somewhere to keep them safe, and so that's how they ended up at the Glenbow, and they're there now, and I think we have people to look after them now, so that can take care of them and bring them home. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I was just wondering, is there a repatriation plan in place right now, or what are the next steps if you're able to share them publicly?
I'm not sure how to answer that question, because I try to keep everything until everything's done. I wait till everything is finished and until it actually happens. But that is my goal. That is our goal for the community, is to have them back in the community, for everyone, for the community, because they belong to the community and to our members and the Mide-wigwas society, and so yes, that is a goal, and I will share more when that I will share more when that time comes. Miigwech.
Thanks so much, Angelina. We have Elder and Knowledge Keeper Carolyn Moore, who is with us for today's presentation. And Carolyn, feel free to jump on with your comment at any time if you'd like.
Good afternoon, ladies. I just want to say a big miigwech to all your hard work that you do to educate us. I know the Mide, some of the Mide teachings, and I I just find them so beautiful and loving, and something that I want to continue to learn about. But my comment was as the Seven Fires teachings, and I was just saying before we started today off that a lot of our ancestors are, what they were telling us from long ago is coming true today. And that the scrolls, I'm so happy to hear, were found. And so that means that bigger and better changes are going to continue to happen because of all that's happening so quickly today. And I just want to say miigwech, and I know they're coming home because that's where they belong. And yeah, the Seven Fires is such a beautiful teaching, and the scrolls are a part of that teaching, and so I want to continue to learn. I might drop by Urban Shaman without even let you guys know I'm coming because of protocols, and you might just have to let me in. So miigwech, everybody. Thank you again for your hard work.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. I'd like to invite audience members as well. If you have a comment or a question, or you just want to join the conversation, doesn't even have to be a question, just let us know. And as I said, we can unmute you, or feel free to type it in the Q&A. Thank you so much to Angelina for your willingness to share that video performance earlier, as well as to share your exhibition, your knowledge, and your practice. It's just been really amazing to listen in on this conversation. So thank you, Angelina, and thank you, Jessica, for your moderation and for your conversation, and for Dana for your amazing introduction. It was just so fabulous, and so much knowledge was being shared. So thank you very much. And this is the last panel of Worldings, a virtual conference. It's just been such an amazing weekend of such incredible conversation. So I'm just very grateful to have been a part of it. I'd like to invite Griffin's director, Lisa Baldissera, as well as Dana Warren, Urban Shaman's director, to say a few closing remarks as we wrap up this wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, Jazz. And thank you to the wizard, Dana Warren. I don't even know how you pulled all of that off just now, but that was a lot of wizardry. And yeah, just thanks to Angelina and Jessica, and for all their work on the project, and that the work continues, you know.
Just behind me. Yes, we'll go into our closing remarks because I'm just like so frazzled right now. That was a lot of complex technical abilities, but I do, and all my thank yous, I forgot to thank my amazing technicians, Teo Pelmish and Robert Snowbird, for putting the magic together. So thank you guys so much for making that such a smooth and amazing presentation. And sweating, we're sweating like crazy right now in the gallery space.
Oh, thank you so much, Dana, and thank you for your partnership. Thanks to all your. It's just been a wonderful weekend, and it has been recorded, and we will be circulating the recordings to everyone after the fact. I just want to thank again Elder Carolyn Moore for all that she did to set the magic for this weekend of the sharing and the courageous testimony and all of the work of making artwork and understanding process and opening up to the vulnerability of work and that requirement for openness to the unknown, which came through in, I think, everyone's work throughout the weekend. I want to thank Candace Allison for her presentation this morning, for moderating and preparing the presentation. Also, Patrick Mautloa, Tim E. Kosi Komi Wai, Fadze Muchemwa on the first panel, for sharing that incredible history of the bag factory. And it was just so interesting to hear that in parallel to Urban Shaman's history today, and to think about, you know, the work and agility that's required to keep these organizations running through all kinds of forces, whether they're funding or internal forces or whatever the challenges are that you, really it's down to these very committed people who continue to have the vision for these spaces. So thank you to those people in both organizations. And I'd also like to thank Api Patra Ruga for sharing with us about the victory of the word and also about the Bodyland Incubator. All of the spotlight features that we had over the conference, we will be sending you links so that you can actually learn a little bit more about them. And if you wish to donate to these organizations, that is one of the things that we wanted to do, is just share information about the incredible work of these organizations. And that includes the Indigenous Residential School Survivors Society, who presented yesterday, and last weekend, Take Home Manitoba, the BIPOC Arts House program in Winnipeg. Again, thanks to Angelina Mcleod and Jessica Jacobson Konefal for the presentation today. Thanks to Dana for, I think, the heat wave. We all know in BC what that was like, so we feel for you that you're going through it there now. And I also just want to thank Jillian Ross and Brendan Kopestik for facilitating so many of the connections in South Africa and for facilitating my research trip over there February 2020 before the lockdown happened, so that I could meet all of these amazing people. So thank you so much to Jillian and Brendan for that work and connections. I also want to thank all of our staff at Griffin, Nathaniel Marchand, Myrna Habashi, our Young Canada Work student, Brittany Grodelars, our gallery manager, and our volunteer Liam Neal. And I want to say a huge thank you to Jazz Keeler, our contract visual programs coordinator, who makes it all look so easy. And that is just because she works so darn hard at getting it all put together. And thank you for your just incredibly graceful coordination, Jazz. And we just thank you all to the attendees for coming. And we hope that you will revisit some of the program later, and that it will offer some kinds of sustenance as you go through your own processes and art making and activism and working for organizations that may or may not be ready for you.
True. Yeah, so many thank yous. I don't want to double up too much on what Lisa said, but I do once again have to acknowledge the amount of energy and work that Jazz has put into this. I think you're amazing. If anybody else wants to hire her, she's worth money. She'll make it smooth as possible, which is incredible. I also want to thank my staff. I thank my technicians, but I can tell that one of my other coworkers, Liz Garlicki, is on here as well. So she's the one that's been kind of sending little notes and links to people if you want to check out more of our programming. As we mentioned, we're trying to get this exhibition up, but right now with the lockdown that we're still under in Winnipeg, libraries and museums still can't open just yet. So we're not sure if we're going to be able to. We're hoping, we still got our fingers crossed, but we will try to get the virtual gallery up in time that people can at least see the show. And yeah, Carolyn, you're welcome to come by anytime in Hassela, so we will totally welcome you. It's such a beautiful performance, and
the ephemera of that from that performance is still up, as you guys could tell from the button blanket or the star blanket that's up with all the medicines on it. So yeah, and so just once again, all the sponsors. I see that Amy's on here, which is really amazing. I'm glad that you were able to check it out. And I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned you guys enough, but Archives, Counter Archives has been incredible for this project as well. So Lisa, you're amazing to work with. And yes, we got to do something again. Maybe not so soon. We'll need some rest now for the next couple of weeks. But yes, I think we need to partner on more incredible programming. So, oh, they're all happy. So that's a good sign. I didn't run them through the ringer too much today. So yeah, and I just want to thank all the panelists, the attendees, the presenters, incredible words and such great ideas that came forward. So thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and have lots of rest. Drink water.
Thanks, everybody.